One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 441-460. Chapter 441. Martial Tianping. It is said that when Wukong was tricked into becoming an official in the heavenly court, the result was either a peach or a horse. Every time he thinks of this, his sense of shame bursts into the air, and now this pig dares to mention the 3 words, Bai Ma Wen, is simply courting death. Wukong's body is small and very flexible, while Baji has the ability, but his body is bloated and can't move well, so he was beaten to no strength. In the end, the monkey beat the pig to the ground and kept his name as a big brother. Although Baji, who was lying on the ground, refused to accept it, he had no choice but to admit it. Wukong put the golden hoop stick on Baji's stomach and asked, "Since you know what I did in the heaven, I must be a figure in the sky, and I will write your name in the news." Baji gave a wry smile, shook his head and said, "Where's the name? I'm a pig." Wukong looked at Baji very lonely, very similar to when he was at the foot of Wuji Mountain, and he couldn't help feeling pity. He finally put away the golden hoop and said, "No matter what kind of a mortal you are, you can't be innocent. What's the reason for beating that bald donkey? Let me tell you that I won't die." Baji glanced at their publicity not far away, and said, "Because I don't want to go to the west, the end of the scriptures is not a good place. Since I have already descended to the mortal world, I will stay in the mortal world and be free, why bother to go back?" Zhang Yang found that Baji already knew that he was peeping, so he walked out embarrassedly, came to them, and said to Wukong, "You should have known each other long ago, he is Marshal Tianping, who used to be in charge of 100,000 navy in heaven." Quote. Baji smiled, "You are wise, you even know this." Zhang Yang said proudly, "How dare you take the Western classic without 2 brushes? Not only do I know that you are Marshal Tianping, but I also know that you were banished to the mortal world for molesting Chang'e." Before he finished speaking, Bajia jumped up with red eyes and, base, stretched out 2 black hands and grabbed towards Zhang Yang's neck. Wukong's eyes were quick and his hands were quick. He quickly put the golden hoop on Baji's hand, trapped his 2 hands together, and then lifted his foot and kicked Baji away. Baji rolled twice on the ground, stood up and scolded Zhang Yang, "Bald donkey, if you dare to say 1 word of Fairy Chang'e, I will bite you to the bone." Wukong said to Zhang Yang, "I suddenly started to like this guy. He also calls you a bald donkey." Zhang Yang was about to collapse, and he roared, "I am your master. Can you give me some face? Do you want to kill me like this? Pig head. Then tell me, how did you get demoted to the mortal world? If you say if it's a lie, I'll go to Guanghan Palace to find Fairy Chang'e right away, and bring her down to see you like a pig." Hearing Zhang Yang say this, Baji didn't dare to make a fool of himself. Fairy Chang'e couldn't see his appearance like this, so he had to endure his anger and tell the reasons for all this. More than 500 years ago, at that time, Sun Wukong hadn't made a lot of trouble in the heavenly palace, but the heavenly court was no longer peaceful. Because the Queen Mother likes to see the Milky Way up close, but because there is a very ancient water monster living in the Milky Way. It has 9 heads, a snake-like body, and 4 claws. He will eat all gods, immortals, and Buddhas in 1 bite. In desperation, the Jade Emperor spread heroic posts and summoned capable people in the 3 realms to come up and conquer the galaxy water demon. Of course, most of the people were defeated, and they were not the opponents of the water demon. When it was Baji's turn, because he did have some skills, the 36 changes of Tiangong were by no means a vain name. He turned into a mosquito to provoke the water demon, but when the huge water demon faced Baji, who could not see clearly but was very annoying, he could only frantically toss around in the galaxy, and finally exhausted himself. Fall down. Later, when the Queen Mother proposed to kill the water demon, Baji came out to speak for the water demon. As long as the water demon can be subdued, there is no need to harm its life. Therefore, the water demon was very moved, recognized Baji as his master, and never did anything wrong in the Milky Way. Gradually, the Milky Way has become a tourist attraction in heaven, and gods from all walks of life often come to explore the beauty of the Milky Way. Over time, the Queen Mother became jealous, and she could only appreciate such a beautiful Milky Way. So she proposed to the Jade Emperor to set up a naval army and set up a military stronghold near the Milky Way, so that it would be difficult for ordinary people to enter there. Using military training as an excuse can just avoid everyone's gossip, which is the best of both worlds. In the end, the Jade Emperor also did as she said, and established the Tianting Navy. The headquarters was set up in the Milky Way, with Baji as the general manager, and was named Marshal Tianping. This time, the happy person is not only the Queen Mother, but also Fairy Chang'e from Guanghan Palace. It turned out that when Baji conquered the Milky Way water demon, Chang'e was adored and fascinated by his wisdom and courage and skill. Now that he has become the Marshal of Tianping, the attention of thousands of people, he must be permanently stationed in the heaven, so that Chang'e can see him often. Chang'e's heart, how could Baji not feel it? Every time he looked at Guanghan Palace, the beautiful fairy living there always cast a warm look at him. However, every time at this moment, Baji regretted that his bowels were blue. He was originally ordered by his master to conquer the water demon, but he didn't expect that he could not resist the temptation of becoming an official and became the Marshal of Tianping. Since he has become an immortal, this kind of love is definitely not allowed. If he is immortal, maybe there is still a half chance. Chang'e's eyes were hot and sad, completely stealing Baji's heart. He couldn't bear it any longer, and ran to the Jade Emperor to resign, but was ruthlessly dismissed. Heavenly Court is at the time of employing people, how can it be so easy to let people go? Baji was not reconciled, and every day he told the Jade Emperor that he was going to resign. At first, the Jade Emperor would persuade him bitterly, but then he ignored him directly, and refused to meet Baji as far as possible. Finally, Baji met Chang'e in Guanghan Palace without telling everyone the truth. When he told her about his lovesickness, what he received was Chang'e's icy ridicule. As the Grand Marshal of the Tianhe Water Army, it's frustrating to think only about your children's affairs all day long. Baji left with sadness. He couldn't figure it out. How could Chang'e treat him so badly? Could it be that the eyes he saw before were all hallucinations? After Baji returned, he stared at the moon every day, thinking Chang'e's name in his heart. The Jade Emperor realized that Baji had not come to see him for a long time. He thought he had figured it out and was happy for him. Only Chang'e put away her admiration and locked herself in the Guanghan Palace, depressed and silent. How could she watch the man she admires give up her great future? So, this is the only way to make him give up. Chapter 442, The Arrival of Chang'e. Later, Sun Wukong made a big disturbance in the Tiangong, Nantianmen fell, and entered the Lingxiao Palace. Marshal Tianping, who was supposed to fight to kill the enemy, didn't help because he missed Chang'e. Finally, he didn't go into battle until Taibaijingsing came to him. However, where did he have the heart to fight? He was beaten so casually by the monkey, and he fell to the ground and pretended to be dead. After Wukong was crushed by the Tathagata Buddha to the foot of Wuji Mountain, the heavenly court regained peace and order, but Tianping was not so lucky. He pretended to be defeated by Sun Wukong, which made the Jade Emperor doubt his morality. Reuse. The Tianhe squadron has also been repeatedly deleted, and in the end only a few people are left to support the scene. The canopy was broken, and he didn't care about it at all. Even if he was dismissed or demoted to the mortal world, this was something he could not ask for. However, a lieutenant named Zhang Lang under Tianping didn't think so. He finally managed to get into this position, but he was not reconciled to Tianhe's loneliness. So when he saw Tianping looking so unhappy, he knew his chance had come. One day, while no one was paying attention, Zhang Lang put medicine into Tianping's wine so that he could not sleep, and then released the water demon in Tianhe. This time, the water demon who came out of the Tianhe acted recklessly and made troubles in various immortal worlds. It wasn't until Tianping woke up that he realized that something had happened. He spent a lot of effort to bring the water demon back to the Tianhe, but even though he saved the situation. But the Jade Emperor still unceremoniously ordered the immediate beheading of the Queen Mother, citing negligence and suspicion of murdering the Queen Mother. If Taebaijingxing hadn't come out to speak, maybe Tianpeng would have been beheaded, but the death penalty was inevitable, and the Jade Emperor still refused to let him go, and ordered him to be demoted to the mortal world. In the end, I don't know if it was the Jade Emperor's secret order or God's will, the canopy was thrown into the pig's womb, and the lower realm became a pig demon. Later, Guanyin Bodhisattva incorporated him into the brigade of taking scriptures and asked him to take refuge in my Buddha, abstain from 5 meat and 3 hatreds, and named him 8 precepts. Later, after listening to the Bodhisattva's advice, Baji waited for the person to take the scriptures at Jalaozhuang. He also instructed him to make as much noise as possible, and to bring the scripture person to surrender to him. However, Baji didn't have the heart to learn scriptures at all, but when he thought of letting him go to learn scriptures, it must be the meaning of Taebaijingxing. This old man had a relationship with his master, so Baji reluctantly agreed. When he arrived at Gaojiazhuang, Baji was only working step by step, and he didn't plan to make any noise. What he thought was that if the person who took the scriptures just missed him, then there would be no need to go to the west. However, he planted flowers without intention, and planted willows and willows for shade. Baji didn't want to make a lot of noise, but he made a big noise. Gao Quilin, the third lady of the Gao family, actually fell in love with her, which he never expected. But Baji had no choice but to leave Gao's house and go back to the mountains to continue living his rotten life, watching the moon in a daze every day and so on. After listening to him, Zhang Yang really couldn't figure it out, so he asked, "You don't want to go. If you don't want to go, why do you want to kill me?" Baji said indifferently, "I am too tired to live, and I can't do it myself, so if I kill you, they will do something to me." Of course Zhang Yang knew who they were referring to. He thought about it and found that Baji's heart was Chang'e, so he said, "Since people don't like you, can you stop being so persistent? There are so many women in the world. Why hang from a tree?" At this moment Wukong said, "Bald donkey, you are a monk, don't instigate others to break the precepts." Zhang Yang shook his head. "What kind of a monk? I'm just bald, and I'm not a monk. What are we studying scriptures for? To save all sentient beings. What is the purpose of saving all sentient beings? Let everyone live happily, right? Baji is already in such pain. Do we let him continue to suffer in this way? Monkey, don't forget why you learned from the scriptures." Wukong thought for a while, and then said to Baji, "Although this bald donkey is not very serious at ordinary times, some of what he said is right. Since you can't forget Chang'e, you can go to learn scriptures with us. At least you can divert your attention, maybe halfway. If you can think about it, it will be fine if you leave." Quote. Baji stared at Wukong, his eyes relaxed, but he didn't say anything. Wukong turned his head and stretched his waist, and said, "Don't think too much about it. I just think everyone is pitiful, just help each other." Zhang Yang also shouted loudly, "Poor bastard, a great sage monkey king and a marshal of Tianpeng, they are all awesome. If you want me to say, we can stop when we arrive at the daughter country. With the appearance of my brother, are you afraid that we won't be able to win the king of the daughter country? Just a joke." Just as he spoke with a bright face and spittle stars flying, Wukong and Baji both looked behind him. I only heard a crisp, cough, sound. Guanyin Bodhisattva didn't know when she arrived. She coughed twice and said to Zhang Yang, "I'll just assume that what you just said was a dream talk, and I won't hold you accountable." Zhang Yang just wanted to find a crack and get in. He hid behind Wukong and stopped talking. Baji looked at the woman beside Guanyin, and his eyes instantly became wet. He opened his mouth and hesitated for a long time before calling out her name, Fairy Chang'e. Chang'e looked at the ugly pig's head, and felt so distressed. She flew down regardless of Guanyin's presence, hugged Baji, and shouted, "Tianpeng. You're suffering." Baji couldn't believe that Chang'e was actually hugging him. He hurriedly stretched out his hand, but stopped in midair because there was still a golden hoop on it. Chang'e noticed his strangeness, and he was still complaining about himself, so she wiped her tears and said, "Tianpeng, I'm sorry, I caused you to become what you are now." Baji was shocked and asked, why do you say that? Chang'e explained, if it wasn't for my admiration for you, you wouldn't have been influenced by me to be demoted to the lower world. Baji couldn't believe what she said and asked, I met you in Guanghan Palace and expressed my will, but the fairy mocked me as a bad person, why do you say that you love me? Chang'e said, I fell in love with Tianpeng, but immortals can't have emotions and desires. I was afraid that the Jade Emperor would hurt you, so I reluctantly parted my love and said that to you. I'm sorry. Chapter 433, Departure. If possible, Baji really wants to hold Chang'e like this forever, until the sea is dry and the rocks are devastated. However, Guanyin Bodhisattva could hardly bear it anymore, so he coughed twice, signaling them to stop. Guanyin said, You idiot, I asked you to wait for the person who learned the scriptures again. I didn't expect that you didn't care about the responsibility of learning scriptures, and even wanted to kill him. Do you know what's wrong? Baji held Chang'e's hand and nodded vigorously. This disciple is wrong, the disciple is ignorant, and it almost caused a catastrophe. When Guanyin saw that he was still holding Chang'e's hand, he became angry. Bold, take your pig's trotters away, Fairy Chang'e, come here quickly. Chang'e had no choice but to return to Guanyin. Then she continued, I brought the fairy here to unravel the knot in your heart. Now you are willing to go to learn the scriptures. Baji thought about it for a while, but still shook his head. Bodhisattva, if you can become an immortal by abandoning your feelings, I won't go, I want to be with Fairy Chang'e. Avalokitesvara looked like she hated iron but not steel, and scolded, Idiot, I don't want you to be an immortal, but I want you to take refuge in my Buddha, Buddha, understand? Think about it, I'll give you a second to think about it. At this time Fairy Chang'e said, Tianpeng, you can follow Master to learn scriptures. We will have a chance to meet again when we reach the western heaven. If you continue to stay in the world, we can only watch each other from a long distance. Quote. Hearing what Chang'e said, Baji didn't have to think about anything, and immediately said, I'll go, Fairy Chang'e, wait for me. Guanyin listened to it for a long time, and always felt that something was wrong, but Baji agreed, and she didn't want to think so much. This matter has been resolved, and there is one more thing that has not been resolved, she said to Zhang Yang. I warn you, don't play any crooked ways of the daughter country. If you want to go home, just obediently complete the task of studying scriptures from the West. I want to ask the Buddha to let him use the gate of time and space to take you home. In addition, you are a monk, and taking sutras is also the way to take refuge in my Buddha. You must strictly abide by the precepts, understand? Zhang Yang nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice, but he was very upset. How could he live without eating meat? Of course, he couldn't say this to his face, unless he was tired of living. After that, Guanyin Bodhisattva left with Fairy Chang'e. Before leaving, Chang'e said to Baji, Tianpeng, come on. Baji was moved to tears and said, Don't worry, you have to take care of yourself. After they left, Zhang Diao Erlang came to Bajia and said, Tisk, I like Chang'e so much, my number one infatuated man in the world is really boring to me. Baji scratched his head embarrassedly and called out, Master, and, elder brother. Zhang Yang was very happy to hear it, shook his head and asked, What did you say? I can't hear you. Master. Be louder, I can't hear you. Master. Speak louder, don't be stingy, and say a few more words. Master. When the three of them returned to Gao Laozhuang, Mrs. Gao had been waiting at the door for a long time. When she saw Zhang Yang and his party came back, she hurriedly went to greet him. Holy monk, you are back. Hey, what's your face? Is it all blood? I saw Zhang Yang's 2 ear holes, 2 nostrils, 2 eye holes, and his mouth, and his 7 orifices were bleeding. He narrowed his eyes and didn't hear what Mrs. Gao said. He could only vaguely see her opening her mouth, so he asked, Mrs. Gao, what are you saying? I can't hear you louder. Madame Gao could only put her mouth to Zhang Yang's ear and shouted loudly, Holy monk, I said you are finally back. Zhang Yang nodded with a smile. I have eaten. Mrs. Gao was confused, but when he saw Zhu Baji behind Zhang Yang, he slumped on the ground in fright, shouting, "Come on, that pig demon is back." Zhang Yang could roughly feel that Mrs. Gao was talking about Baji, so he stepped forward and explained, "Don't worry, Mrs. Gao, he is my second apprentice, his name is Zhu Baji, he looks a little ugly, a little dark, and disgusting. A little bit, but it's my apprentice anyway, give me some face, okay?" Madame Gao shouted, "Holy monk, why do you keep accepting these strangely shaped apprentices?" Zhang Yang nodded with a smile, "I've eaten it, no need to ask again." Wukong and Baji looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. At this time, a family member ran over and said to Mrs. Gao, "Madam, the third lady is out." I saw Gao Qilan walk to the front yard very weakly with the help of the two maids, and then saw Zhu Baji at a glance. She opened her mouth, almost uttering the name, Gao Dasha, but she held back. When Mrs. Gao saw her daughter come out, she was so excited that tears rolled in her eyes. She hurriedly stepped forward to help her daughter, and said to her, "This is a holy monk from the Tang dynasty, and the elders monkey and elder pig are all his disciple. You should have met the holy monk." Gao Qilan nodded, her eyes were always on Zhu Baji, her mouth was tightly closed, her mind was very heavy. Wukong pushed Baji's body and motioned for him to go up and say a few words. Baji thought about it too. Since he was about to leave, he should end everything. He couldn't keep dragging down Gao Qilan's heart. Zhu Baji came to Gao Qilan, hesitated for a while, and then said, "Miss Gao, I am tall." Before he could finish speaking, Gao Qilan interrupted him. "Where did the wild boar come from? It's really ugly, mother, I'm going back to rest, and they'll leave it to you to entertain." The moment she turned around, she burst into tears. Zhu Baji smiled awkwardly, and then returned to Wukong's side again, with no expression on his face. Wukong looked at him and didn't speak to him, but tugged at Zhang Yang's ears and shouted, "Bald donkey, it's time to hit the road, don't linger." Zhang Yang nodded and said to Mrs. Gao, "Since my apprentices have all received them, your daughter can get out of bed and walk around, as well as your old man. If you can't do it, Mrs. will remarry. Anyway, the Gao family has a lot of money, right?" Mrs. Gao wanted to say something, but Zhang Yang didn't give her a chance, so she turned around and left. Baji followed him out. Wukong went to the courtyard to lead the horse, and just before he stepped out of Gao's house, someone stopped him. Gao Qilan ran to Wukong with red eyes, handed him a set of clothes in her hand, and said, "Please, elder son, help me give this to him, thank you very much." Wukong smiled and said, "What? You just pretended. It's fine if you don't ask." Qilan's tears couldn't stop flowing after this question. She choked and said, "I heard that the holy monk took 2 elders to the west to get scriptures. I can't delay Dasha's future, since we have already. I am a member of Buddhism. I don't dare to have any delusions, and I hope elder son will keep the secret for me." Quote. Chapter 444, Truth or Dare. It stands to reason that with the addition of Zhu Baji, the team will be very lively, but the fact is just the opposite. Along the way, Baji and Wukong have hardly spoken. Moreover, these two people and Zhang Yang have not spoken much, and they seem to be thinking about their own thoughts. The atmosphere couldn't be more embarrassing. In order to break this atmosphere, Zhang Yang suggested that everyone play a game together. That is, Truth or Dare, which was attended by Zhang Yang, Wukong and Baji. The third prince of West Blue, the dignified white dragon, was a tall, rich and handsome man. He didn't bother to play these games and went to eat grass. Zhang Yang found an open space, then pulled the two of them to sit down, and explained, "The rules of the game are very simple. When we stretch our hands behind our backs, and then take them out, we can use the palms of our hands or the backs of our hands, and then. In short, the single person can choose the truth or the big adventure, do you understand?" Wukong and Baji nodded. Obviously they were very disgusted with such a mentally handicapped game, and they reflected it on their faces from the heart. Take a rest and have no choice but to agree to play this game with Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang nodded with satisfaction, Okay, let's start. The palm of the hand and the back of the hand. The palm of Zhongyang and Wukong. Baji is the back of the hand, and Baji chooses the truth. Zhongyang thought for a while, then asked, Baji, have you ever fallen in love with the third lady of the Gao family? Baji was stunned. He didn't expect to ask such a private question as soon as he came up. He hesitated for a long time, and finally shook his head. Zhongyang was unhappy and retorted, Don't play false, men are affectionate and promiscuous, what can I do to tell the truth? Baji blushed and said, What are you asking? I just made an agreement with Fairy Chang'e, so just ask me this question, why is my heart so dark, and if you say it, what do you want me to do with Fairy Chang'e? Explain. Seeing that Baji was really in a hurry, Zhongyang didn't dare to fight him again, so he had to assume that he answered correctly. Next is Wukong's question. After seeing Zhongyang's question, he found out that the game is quite interesting. There is one thing he has never understood, and he can take this opportunity to ask clearly, who is your master? There was a sensitive issue just now, and now a more sensitive issue has arisen. Baji shook his head, refusing to speak. Wukong excitedly said, Then what's the point of playing this game? It's not good or it's not good, don't disappoint. Baji said angrily, My master made me swear not to reveal his name without authorization, otherwise I will be skinned and cramped, and my soul will be demoted to the 9 serenities. Hearing this, Wukong's eyes lit up, and he almost couldn't help laughing. It seems that Baji's master is quite similar to his own master, and both have a hobby of not letting their apprentices say their own names. Seeing the monkey laughing, Baji thought he was laughing at him, and felt even more upset, and punched him to the ground. Zhongyang was taken aback, and hurriedly waved his hand at Wukong, and said, Forget it, I have no experience playing the first time, let's play another game. At the beginning of the second round, this time it was Zhongyang and Baji's hands, Wukong took out his palm, and he chose to take a big risk. It was Zhongyang who started first. He said, I have heard about the 72 transformations of the Monkey King for a long time. Come and show us your ability to transform a bunch of little monkeys with monkey hair. Originally, when he heard the previous words, Wukong was proud of his heart, but when he heard the latter words, his face immediately became wrong, and his whole face turned black. Monkey son is the pain in Wukong's heart. He can't hear anyone mentioning this in front of him. If it wasn't for Zhongyang, who was a scholar, maybe he would have been beaten with a stick. I don't change 1. Zhongyang didn't realize the seriousness of the problem, and said with a wicked smile, Yo, the great sage Monkey King is putting on airs, hurry up, let's cheer for the great sage. Sun Wukong had already taken the golden hoop out of his ear at this moment. It was only the size of an embroidery needle. He held it in his hand and spun it, then stared at Zhongyang murderously and said, I said, change it. Zhongyang, who finally sensed something was wrong, swallowed his saliva and said uneasily, No, you have already performed. It is really wonderful to take out the golden hoop. Next, Zhu Baji gave an order. He still remembered the problem that the monkey gave him just now. Now is the chance for revenge. He smiled maliciously, and then said, Since all the golden hoops have been taken out, then just make gestures on the ground, and write the name of your master and your master. Quote. This was quite an obvious provocation, and Sun Wukong turned his head to stare at Baji and said, I won't do it. This is good, Sun Wukong doesn't do this or that, it's obviously a rogue. But who can let him do what he says he can't do? Zhongyang saw that the game could not be played, so he had to say no, and then got up and prepared to leave. However, Sun Wukong and Zhu Baji pulled Zhongyang down very tacitly and said in unison, Do it again. In the third game, Zhongyang's palm, Wukong and Baji didn't show anything. Zhongyang was dumbfounded. What do you two mean? Wukong said, Didn't you say that as long as you are single, you have to choose the truth or the big adventure? Baji also said, Obviously, you are on the order, hurry up and choose. Seeing the same evil revealed in the eyes of the two, Zhongyang understood. They both made it clear that they wanted to fix themselves. With the constant persecution of the two, he could only choose first. Anyway, the big adventure was dangerous, so he chose the truth. Wukong asked first, "Where are you from?" "This is not really a problem," Zhang Yang answered without hesitation. "I come from another world, higher than your world." Wukong didn't intend to let him go, and continued to ask, "Can you make it clearer and fool us?" Zhang Yang looked helpless. "Really, what else can I say? It's a world higher than yours anyway. Didn't even Guanyin Bodhisattva say it? I'm not in these three worlds." Wukong stared at Zhang Yang's eyes for a while, feeling that he wasn't lying, so he let him go. "The second is Baji," he asked. "Who is the woman you like?" "Be clear." Zhang Yang shook his head. "I don't have a woman I like yet." Eight Rings pointed to his arm and asked, "You have the words Lin Xiaoyu engraved on your arm. Who is she? Are you fooling us?" Zhang Yang really didn't know why there were such words on his arm. He had already told the truth. But Wukong and Baji refused to accept the account, and the two rushed towards Zhang Yang together. One scratched his creak and the other buckled his waist. Zhang Yang laughed and cried in this painful and happy situation. In this way, the relationship between Wukong and Baji seems to be a step closer, and the two of them have found a common topic, that is, bullying Zhang Yang. Chapter 445, Master Wu Chao. Zhang Yang and his party walked westward. They had been walking for more than a month. They left the Uzang kingdom and came to Buddha Mountain. Baji led the horse, then pointed to the mountain and said, "This is Buddha Mountain. There is a Zen master Wuchao practicing on the mountain. The old pig recognizes him. However, he is a bit difficult to deal with, so we should leave quickly." Zhang Yang rode on the horse and said disapprovingly, "Since I am a practitioner, I naturally have to meet. I have always encountered monsters along the way, but I haven't met any immortals yet." Wukong joked that he had never seen the world, and said, "What is there to see immortals? When my grandson made a big havoc in the Tiangong, he did not rarely see immortals." Zhang Yang was unhappy, and retorted, "The two of you, the great sage Monkey King and the martial Tianping, naturally vomited. I don't see them as easily as you. Listen to me, go up and look for that one after a while." "What a bird master!" Baji corrected. "It's Zen Master Wuchao. By the way, senior brother, I don't agree with you saying that immortals are all the same. There are still good immortals in the sky, but most of them are hidden in the court and don't show themselves very much." Wukong knew who Baji was talking about. Naturally it was Taibaijingsing, a civil servant in that court. He was the one who pulled Wukong up to the sky at first, and he was the one who interceded for Wukong. Later, it was also him who introduced Baji to the sky to get rid of the Milky Way water demon, and interceded for Baji. It was also him, this Taijingsing, who was really busy. Now that he thought of this, Wukong had no choice but to ask, "Baji, I want to ask you a question. Your master will not mention his surname first, but my old grandson guesses that he is definitely not a Buddhist, it should be a Taoist, and you are now taking the path of taking refuge in my Buddha. Are you not afraid of offending your master?" Baji smiled and said, "Senior brother's words are serious. Even the Jade Emperor is a combination of the three religions. What is the difference between Lao Tzu, who was born in Taoism and converted to Buddhism later? Besides, he has cut off contact with me. He has nothing to do with half a dime. Instead, it is you, senior brother, who is not a Buddhist before." Wukong said, "Now it's a bit unreasonable to say that my old grandson learned all the skills by himself, but after my master taught me the skills, he also cut off the relationship with me, and said that no matter what the trouble is, he is not allowed to mention it. His name. Now that I've been walking along the way, I've been thinking about why there was a lot of trouble in the heavenly palace, and what master said, and then I vaguely realized that he seemed to have known that I would cause trouble, but he didn't deliberately remind me that this is something I can't figure out." Baji said, "Senior brother, don't think so deeply. You have taken refuge in my Buddha, so let the past go with the wind." Unexpectedly, Wukong stared deeply at Baji and said to him, "My old grandson never said anything about taking refuge in my Buddha." Hearing a pig and a monkey talking about something that Zhang Yang couldn't understand, he had calluses on his ears long ago, so he interrupted them. I said, now the master of both of you is me. Okay, what Buddha and Tao? I only believe in the spirit of communism. Wukong and Baji couldn't understand what Zhang Yang was talking about. Baji first asked, Master, Guanyin sent you to fetch scriptures, why don't you believe in Buddhism? Zhang Yang got off the white dragon horse, stretched his waist and twisted his butt, and then said, I just don't understand why people should bow down if the Buddha is not vain. If the Buddha is not greedy, why should people worship him? Of course, your current thinking is very different. It's hard to understand. The purpose of religion is to manage and control the masses at the beginning, so that you are afraid first, and then you are obedient. Quote. Wukong stared at Zhang Yang with great interest, and said, Bald donkey, you really surprise Lao Sun that you still have this enlightenment. Many people don't understand this, so they blindly believe in Buddha, trying to ask Buddha to help them clear up all their difficulties. But I haven't seen anyone from Fodu. Zhang Yang shook his head and said, actually, there is nothing wrong with belief. In fact, people with beliefs will be much happier and happier than those without beliefs. When these people have unpleasant things in their hearts, they will pray and talk to them. From a psychological point of view, they will vent their emotions appropriately, and will also vent part of their troubles and pains, and people will be much more relaxed. To give another example, two people suffered a desperate thing at the same time. One had no faith and was unwilling to talk to others. His troubles and pains accumulated in his heart. In the end, he did not erupt in silence, but died in silence. He committed suicide. And two people with faith, he is willing to talk about these things like faith. The troubles in his heart will disappear little by little, and replaced by the motivation to face life again. Under certain circumstances, Buddha is actually a transcendence. To put it more simply, it means that people cross themselves. Monkey, I dare to bet you that when you were at the foot of Wuji Mountain, you didn't even have a person to talk to, and you must be very miserable because of your lack of faith. And now, Baji believes in Buddha, and he must be a little happier than you. Where has Wukong heard of such a novel theory? Although it is very unusual, it is not lacking in logic. The bald donkey in front of him neither belittled nor praised Buddhism, and was completely neutral. In this respect, he is somewhat similar to that Jin Chanzi. Zhang Yang patted Wukong on the shoulder and said, if you don't want to have faith, you can actually have friends, you can talk to them. Or just tell me, tell Baji, tell Xiaobailong, although it's not long before we got together, but there is still a long way to go, and we are actually the closest people. Quote. At this time, Bajia also said, Senior brother, what master said makes sense. It has been 500 years, and your thoughts have been kept in your heart. That kind of feeling is very uncomfortable, old pig understands. Wukong waved his hand and smiled bitterly, and said, forget it, let's talk about it when you have time. Zhang Yang and Baji looked at each other and didn't force him anymore, so they had to continue on the road. Wukong walked in the front, he kept recalling all the words Zhang Yang had just said, and a familiar feeling surged in his heart, just like the warmth when he was first named Sun Wukong by Patriarch Bodhi. Wukong never called Master Zhang Yang because he felt unworthy. There were actually only two candidates for the master in his heart, Patriarch Bodhi and Jin Chanzi, but now, he seems to have changed his mind. The three of them went up the mountain and came to a huge cypress tree with a pitch-black giant bird-shaped nest made of firewood. Zhang Yang walked over and kicked the tree trunk to call the Zen master Wuchao. Baji shook his head helplessly, as if he could not escape. After a few kicks, Zhang Yang stared at it attentively at some movement from the nest. After a while, black smoke slowly ignited from the lair. Chapter 446, Strange Practitioner. The cloud of black smoke became stronger and stronger, and finally it floated from the nest to the tree and turned into an old man in a black robe. Zen Master Wuchao circled around Zhang Yang and sniffed in front of him again. His behavior was very strange. After seeing Zhang Yang's expression of surprise and disgust, he stopped and saluted Zhang Yang. I've heard the name of the holy monk for a long time. I saw it today, and sure enough. How many days have you not taken a bath? This question caused Zhang Yang to raise his arm and smell it, as if there was indeed such a smell. Of course, I don't blame him. I forgot to take a bath when I was in Gao Laozhuang. It's been more than a month since I walked all the way. He had no choice but to smile awkwardly. Sorry, I really haven't showered for a long time. Who knew the excited expression on Zen Master Wuchao's face? He took Zhang Yang's hand and walked into the depths of the woods, saying as he walked, "Come here, I'll invite you to take a bath." Zhang Yang was a little panicked and said quickly, "Then can I invite my 2 apprentices to wash together? I'm a little embarrassed by myself." Only then did Zen Master Wuchao notice that he had 2 other apprentices. He recognized that one of them was Baji, and the other was the great sage Qishan. He hurriedly said, "It's really disrespectful, so please come quickly, both of you. It all stinks." Wukong walked behind and asked Baji, "What's the matter? This Zen Master Wuchao feels that the visitor is not good. Is there something careful?" Baji explained, "He's just too enthusiastic, even I can't stand it. He's actually a good person. Last time he took me to take a bath, I didn't agree. I don't know if he has any grudge against me now." The 3 were taken by Zen Master Wuchao into a forest full of smog and miasma. The thick fog blurred their vision, and soon Zhang Yang and Wukong got separated. Zen Master Wuchao walked very fast, pulling Zhang Yang without any intention of stopping. When the 2 of them walked out of the dense foggy forest, they actually returned to the previous cypress tree. Zhang Yang felt that something was wrong. He looked back and found that Wukong and Baji hadn't followed, and he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. The little white dragon is under the tree. Fortunately, there is him. Zhang Yang walked up to him and whispered, "If something is wrong in a while, you can help me by showing your original shape." After that, Zen Master Wuchao made a gesture of, "Please," to Zhang Yang and said, "Holy monk, let's go, let's take a bath." Zhang Yang didn't dare to act rashly. He held the reins of the white dragon horse tightly with his hands and asked, "Where are you going?" Zen Master Wuchao pointed to the huge bird's nest on the tree, and then pulled Zhang Yang and flew up. Although the appearance of the huge lair is pitch dark, the interior is full of things. A pool of green water is in the lair, like a clean and flawless mirror. Zen Master Wuchao and Zhang Yang fell into the water together. Fortunately, even if they sat down, the water only submerged their waists. But it is very strange that Zhang Yang's body was not wet with water, but felt very refreshing. It must be the fairy water, which can make people achieve a state of pure heart and few desires. Zen Master Wuchao smiled and said to Zhang Yang, "Have you ever been afraid of ghosts and monsters on this trip?" Zhang Yang said, "Don't be afraid, there are monkeys and pigs as bodyguards for me. I see who dares to stop me." Zen Master Wuchao laughed out loud, and then lightly stroked the water, only to see a white mist emerge from the water, surrounding the 2 of them. After that, Zen Master Wuchao grabbed his hands in the mist, and even took out a black teacup, squeezed it again, and took out a teapot. Then he poured the water from the teapot into the teacup, and there was a hint of the fragrance of tea leaves in the air. "Ask the holy monk to drink tea." Zhang Yang took it and drank it, only to feel very comfortable and light in his body. On the other hand, Wukong and Baji are still wandering in the woods. They have lost their way. Wukong asked, "Baji, don't you know this Zen Master Wuchao? What kind of method does he make, and how to decipher it?" Baji replied, "I don't know either, but it must be some kind of blinding trick that confuses us. Then Zen Master Wuchao is also a master of the Tao." Wukong shook his head and said, "Don't underestimate the ability of that bald donkey. Whether it's thinking or mana, he's not an ordinary person. Let's worry about our situation. I feel something is going to happen." Baji looked at the surrounding environment. It was still thick with fog, and there was no sign of dispersing. He looked up again and said to Wukong, "Brother Monkey, why don't we fly up and stand higher? See farther." Wukong nodded, then kicked his legs and flew into the sky, but when he flew to a certain height, he suddenly disappeared. Then he saw Goku fly out of the ground and return to his original position. He was a little anxious, scratching his ears and cheeks in anger, and scolded, "This damn birdman, when my grandson goes out, he will be beaten to the core with a stick." Baji was not so angry. He knew that Zen Master Wuchao would never harm them. At most, he was trapping them now and preventing them from being with Master, which means that from the current situation, it is Master who is in danger. So he said to Wukong, "Brother Monkey, don't waste your energy. This place should be like a kind of illusion of emptiness. We can't get out. Only when Master and the others are over, they will be freed naturally. Why don't we take a good rest? Fan, you might go out when you wake up." Wukong thought that what Baji said was reasonable and couldn't help laughing. "You really can't look like a person. You can't tell that you are a fat head, big ears and a pig head, but you are actually a person with a delicate mind. My old grandson admires it." Baji shook his head and said to Wukong, "In fact, Brother Monkey, you are the one who can't be seen by appearance. The anxious look just now is definitely not worrying about yourself. You pretend to be a master in your heart." Wukong was so embarrassed by the praise, he flipped his head to the tree, lay on a thicker branch, put his legs up and pretended to say, "I didn't worry about the bald donkey, my grandson just rushed hit the road and find the answer as soon as possible." Quote. Baji was puzzled and asked, "What answer is Brother Monkey looking for?" Wukong said, "I don't understand why the monkeys in Waguoshan want to slander my old grandson, and they also worshipped other monkeys as kings, and they are very resentful to the old grandson." Jin Chanzi said that the answer is on the way to get the scriptures, or in the scriptures. In. Baji said, "Also, there are too many things in the world that can't be understood, so it is necessary to pass the scriptures to cross people. I believe that you will find the answer, Brother Monkey, don't worry." Wukong stopped talking, closed his eyes and recalled bits and pieces of the past. Baji also found a flat place and lay down to rest. They can't imagine that Zhang Yang is going through extremely painful torment now. Chapter 447, Wuchao's Test. As Zen Master Wuchao kept taking out all kinds of delicious food from the white mist, Zhang Yang was already immersed in the delicious food. When he closed his eyes and enjoyed it for a while, when he opened it again, a man suddenly appeared beside him. A beautiful woman in a white veil. Zhang Yang threw away the dessert in his hand. He held the beauty in his arms and stared at her madly. The woman's skin is fair, with black and beautiful hair draped behind her, white teeth and red lips, beautiful nose and eyes. She is like a fairy. Holy monk, is the little girl beautiful? The woman lowered her eyes, showing a sad look in her eyes. Beauty. Zhang Yang swallowed, looking into the woman's eyes. He was completely attracted to her, and he lost consciousness. The woman stroked Zhang Yang's cheek with her tender hand. The jade hand slipped down, her fingertips tapped his chest, and then put her lips against Zhang Yang's ear. Accompanied by a warm air, her voice came from her ear. "Can you stay? Don't go to the west. You and I are here, forever and ever, never parting, okay?" Quote. Hearing this crisp voice, Zhang Yang's whole body softened. He fell into Wuchao, nodded and said, "What are you going to go to? Shishan, I only want you." After that, the woman leaned down, put her lips on Zhang Yang's forehead, and kissed him lightly. As her lips continued to go down, she kissed Zhang Yang's mouth and lingered with him. Zen Master Wuchao shook his head with disgust, and saw Zhang Yang twisting his body over there alone, and he couldn't stand it any longer. Seeing that Zhang Yang was about to take off his trousers, Zen Master Wuchao hurriedly patted the water surface, and the raised water splashes broke the illusion. Zhang Yang looked at the beauty in front of him and suddenly turned hideous. With monkey hair on his face and fangs on his mouth, he opened his bloody mouth towards him. Zhang Yang was so frightened that he moved back. Unexpectedly, Wuchao behind him suddenly failing, he fell down, kept falling. The surrounding environment began to swirl, and Zhang Yang immediately woke up. This was so familiar. Did he want to travel again? This is just the beginning of the journey. He was anxiously struggling in the air, only to see the monkey-faced woman floating down from the black nest chasing after him. Just as the woman opened her mouth and bit her neck, his eyes darkened, the woman disappeared, and the scene around him changed. It was pitch black all around, like an abyss without borders. His feet were in the air, and he didn't dare to move easily. At this time, a familiar voice suddenly came from Zhang Yang's ear. It was Wukong. He hurriedly shouted, "Monkey! Help, where are you?" However, there was no response from Wukong. He seemed to be free and ignoring the publicity. Suddenly, Zhang Yang saw something gradually appear under his feet. When he saw it clearly, he realized that he was stepping on a mirror, and inside the mirror was Wukong lying dormant on his body. Zhang Yang shouted at him, "Monkey! Why are you down there? Come and help me." After calling for a long time, there was no response, but Zhang Yang could still hear Wukong's inner muttering. He got down and put his ears in front of the mirror, and then he could hear what Wukong was saying. "Why is that bald donkey riding high on the horse? He doesn't have the ability to bullshit. If it wasn't for Guanyan's dispatch, my old grandson would have beaten him to death with a stick, and then went to the west by himself. Without him, I would have retrieved the scriptures long ago. Now, trash, he wants me to call him master all day long. It's ridiculous." Zhang Yang raised his head slowly. His eyes were full of doubts and fears. He didn't expect Wukong to think so in his heart. At this moment, the picture of the mirror turned, and Baji appeared in it again. He was lying on the ground and began to mutter in his mind. "I don't know where the bald donkey is now. It delays the trip. The more I think about it, the more angry I get. The old pig is still waiting to meet Fairy Chang'e, or just kill him, so that he can reach the western sky as soon as possible." However, Wukong and Baji seemed to have a good understanding of each other, and they woke up together. Baji said, "Brother Monkey, why don't we just kill that bald donkey?" Wukong nodded. "I think so too, let's go find him now." Looking at his two beloved disciples, Zhang Yang was really chilled to the extreme. Baji always kept calling himself Master, but he didn't expect to call himself a bald donkey behind his back. Just when he was trembling with anger, Zen Master Wu Chao came behind him at some point and said to him, "Holy monk, what are your plans?" Zhang Yang cried and complained to Zen Master Wu Chao, "Master, you don't know anything. Guanyan gave me the only golden hoop that can be used to subdue the monkey, but he accidentally overheard the spell and asked him to give me with a shut mouth spell. I couldn't utter the spell. Now that the two of them are going to kill me together, I'm not worried about my own life, because they can't kill me. I just feel chills. How can I go to the west with such two people by my side? They are not as loyal as my little white dragon." Wu Chao then remembered that there was a little white dragon who didn't show him, so he quietly cast a spell, and the little white dragon's voice came from the mirror again. "Damn bald donkey, I am the third prince of the dignified West Blue Dragon King, a rich and handsome from the sea, and now I have been reduced to the point of being ridden by him as a horse, farting on my back all day. I really want to kick him to death. It is useless at all. Let the monkeys and pigs do everything. He is obviously not Jin Chanzi, but he has to enjoy the same treatment as Jin Chanzi. It's really unfair and blind." Zhang Yang slumped on the ground with his buttocks slumped on the ground. Zen Master Wu Chao helped him up and comforted him. "Don't be discouraged, holy monk. You have to give up like this and let the Guanyan Bodhisattva's face go. You are his appointed person to take the scriptures. There is a way, since these villains with a wicked mentality and wanting to kill his master, it is simply outrageous and should be punished properly." Quote. After hearing this, Zhang Yang nodded quickly. "Yes, that's right, punish well, it's best." Zen Master Wu Chao took his words with a smile and said, "Killed to death." Zhang Yang nodded his head more violently, and said with red eyes, "Yes, yes. Beaten to death, and will never be reborn. It is best to let them stay in the 18th hell forever, reincarnate again and again, and enjoy forever. The taste of pain makes life worse than death, and death is worse than life." Zen Master Wu Chao nodded with satisfaction, and then asked, "Can the holy monk do it himself and get rid of them?" "There's nothing better than this. You say, what should I do?" Chapter 448, Crow. Zen Master Wu Chao returned to Wu Chao with Zhang Yang. What was different from before was that a chessboard appeared in Wu Chao. The chessboard was densely packed with square lines. There were 3 white chess pieces on the board, and a chessboard was placed outside the chessboard. There are countless black chess pieces in the bamboo tube. Seeing this, Zhang Yang said to Zen Master Wu Chao, "Stop playing chess, and quickly get rid of those 3 evil obstacles, I can't help it." Zen Master Wu Chao smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Don't worry, holy monk, if you are a real sword, you may not be their opponent, so I found this chessboard for you, and let you play chess to step by step. Kill them." Zhang Yang didn't quite understand what he meant, but looking at the 3 white pieces, one could almost guess that they represented Wukong, Baji and Bailongma. Then he asked, "Quickly tell me how to play. Go bang or go." Zen Master Wu Chao shook his head and explained, "The way to play chess is very simple. The white chess on the chessboard represents your 3 inferiors and can move, and these black chess can be used to trap them. As long as you keep playing black chess around the 3 of them, keep going underground, keep trapping them, they will be exhausted sooner or later, and then kill them one by one. Wouldn't it be wonderful?" As soon as Zhang Yang heard that it made sense, he picked up the bamboo tube holding the chess with his left hand, then reached in with his right hand and grabbed a handful of black chess pieces, and threw them directly at the 3 white chess pieces. At the same time, Wukong and Baji, who were resting in the foggy forest, heard some strange movements around them. They hurriedly got up and got together and became vigilant. Baji asked, "Brother Monkey, did you hear it? It seems to be the voice of a crow." Wukong took out the golden cudgel from his ear and said, "Baji, be careful, listen to the movement, there seems to be a lot of people, and the people who come here are not good." Baji immediately took out the 9-toothed rake, and observed the surrounding situation back to back with Wukong. Suddenly, the sky darkened in an instant, and they looked up, and there were densely packed crows above their heads, swooping down towards them. Wukong swung the golden cudgel to make it huge and swept across, killing nearly half of the crow. The remaining ones who were unsuccessful continued to dive down. Seeing this, Baji threw the 9-toothed rake into the air. In an instant, the 9-toothed nail rake transformed into a dragon-shaped creature with 9 snake heads. Moving at a fast speed, the 9 heads split apart, and all the remaining crows were killed. When Wukong saw this, he couldn't help but praise, "I really can't see it. Baji, your weapon is actually transformed by a monster. It's amazing." Baji put away the 9 giant monsters and recondensed them into a 9-toothed rake, and then played with his hands twice, explaining, "This is the ancient water monster of the Tianhe River. Later, when I subdued it, it surrendered to me and became my weapon." Quote. The white dragon horse under the black nest was also attacked by the crows. He transformed into a white dragon, rose into the air, opened his mouth and sent out an ultrasonic wave, which shocked all the crows to death. But when he wanted to fly to Wuchao, he found that he was already in a transparent enchantment and could not get out at all. Zhang Yang, who was in Wuchao at the moment, couldn't hear the movement under the tree, but saw that the black chess he had thrown down disappeared almost instantly, and he hurriedly asked, "Master, what's going on? Why is your chess piece missing?" Zen Master Wu Chao explained, "They were all wiped out by your 3 capable apprentices, so I said just now, you have to keep releasing black chess, otherwise they will come here soon and kill you." After hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a while, then he directly turned the bamboo tube down and poured out all the black chess inside. Seeing this, Zen Master Wu Chao hurriedly asked, "Holy monk, you are too cruel." Zhang Yang's eyes were full of bloodshots, and his consciousness seemed to be unclear. He smiled and said to Wu Chao, "See, they still want to kill me, let them taste my power, ha ha ha. Black is infinite, so as long as Zhang Yang maintains such a posture, black will be poured out continuously." Zen Master Wu Chao shook his head, sighed, and thought to himself, "Guanyin Bodhisattva, it seems that this test cannot be passed, and the person who takes the scriptures should choose again." On the other hand, Wukong and Baji had just wiped out a batch of crows. This time another batch appeared. The number was amazing, and unlike the previous batch, these crows had green eyes and a much larger body. You can see the sharp fangs protruding from the corner of the mouth. Wukong said, "It seems that it has something to do with Zen Master Wu Chao. Maybe that bald donkey is in danger now. We can't sit still and find a way to get out of here. The two brothers held weapons while weakening the number of crows, while planning to move elsewhere, but there were too many crows, and they soon surrounded them. At this time, Baji proposed, "Brother Monkey, let's run to both sides, spread them out, and then each find a way to get out of this maze so that we can save Master." After that, the two separated and moved in two directions. Behind them the flock of crows is also scattered into two parts, closely following. Zhang Yang and Wuchao saw that the two closest white chess pieces began to move. They ran in opposite directions, and it seemed that they were planning to break out. How could Zhang Yang be so cheap for them? He hurriedly moved the bamboo tube and sprinkled it in front of the two white chess pieces, blocking their way and forming a surrounding circle. Wukong and Baji didn't run far before they were blocked by a sudden crowd of crows, and they were surrounded by black crows. Wukong plucked the monkey fur and turned into several clones of himself, and then blocked the crow's attack from all directions. Baji continued to turn the nine-toothed nail rake into a nine-headed water demon to attack the crow, and their situation became very dangerous. Presumably the little white dragon, was even more uncomfortable. He didn't have that great ability. Even after incarnating into a dragon, he was inconvenient to move because of his huge body. The crows had torn his body several times, and the blood was flowing. He had no choice but to transform into a human form and use his sword to attack the crows. He thought to himself that Master must have encountered some kind of danger, so he hurriedly broke through the barrier to save him again, but unfortunately the barrier was very powerful. He didn't break it, so he fell to the ground and was surrounded by all the crows. The crows kept tearing at the little white dragon's body, biting him until he was covered in blood, and finally exhausted and stopped resisting. Zhang Yang looked at a white chess piece that was gradually becoming transparent, and asked in surprise, "What's wrong? Did I kill one?" Zen Master Wuchao nodded and said with a look of contempt, "You killed the little white dragon, congratulations, holy monk." He pronounced the word holy monk very seriously. However, Zhang Yang could not hear what he was saying, so he just shouted to himself, refreshing. "If you want to kick me to death, I will kill you first." Chapter 449, Test. The number of crows is getting more and more amazing. Wukong and Baji lost to them, and they were all surrounded. At this time, Zen Master Wuchao thought that it was almost enough, so he changed the chessboard in front of Zhang Yang and the bamboo tube in his hand into disappearance. Zhang Yang was killing vigorously, but suddenly everything disappeared. He stood up anxiously and looked around. The chess game was put away, and the crows naturally disappeared, and Wukong and Baji were finally rescued. "Baji, these black birds are definitely not mortal creatures. It must be that bird man who cast a spell to frame us. Let's go to him now. Force. The bird man doesn't give face to the old pig, so he will definitely ask him for an explanation." Bajia was also very angry. After speaking, the two continued to drill into the forest. Compared with before, they found that the fog in the forest had become lighter, and the scenery was no longer the same. They walked out of the forest shortly after walking. When he came out to look at the cypress tree, and then looked at the Wuchao on the tree, Wukong flew into the sky with a furious anger, and waved the golden hoop to smash it towards the Wuchao. As a result, as soon as the golden hoop rod touched Wuchao, lotus petals extended from the bottom of Wuchao to protect Wuchao. At this time, Bajia shouted from below, "Brother Monkey, don't worry, let's see if Master is there." The white dragon horse also appeared under the tree unharmed at the moment. Baji stroked the horse's head and asked, "Are you all right?" Bai Longma said, "I was just besieged by a group of crows from the evil sect, and I lost to them. I was bitten unconsciously, and when I woke up, I found that my body was intact. It seemed that it was a trick." While Zhang Yang and Wuchao was still looking for where the chessboard was going, a dark figure rose up in front of him. He looked closely and saw that it was Sun Wukong, which scared him to the back of Zen Master Wuchao. Wukong picked up the golden hoop stick and wanted to hit Zen Master Wuchao, but when he saw him stretch out his hand, he said, "Wait a minute, great sage." After that, Zen Master Wuchao explained everything that happened just now. The general meaning is that this is a task given to him by Guanyin Bodhisattva to test whether the team is qualified. Obviously, Zhang Yang, as the captain, does not trust his apprentice at all. On the contrary, Wukong, Baji and Bailongma were all thinking about publicity. After listening to him, Wukong walked behind him, pulled Zhang Yang out by his ears, and scolded, "You stupid bald donkey, it turns out that you have been letting crows harm us. How can you not have such a round head? Smart and smart." Who would have thought that Zhang Yang, who was still frightened just now, was smiling happily at this time, as if he had suddenly changed into a person. He asked Wukong's hand and scolded with a smile, "You stinky monkey, I'm not trying to test the strength of the three of you, look. It's nothing more than that. I'm worried about whether you will protect me or I will protect you on this journey of learning." This time, Zen Master Wuchao was confused. Zhang Yang's performance just now was actually a fake, and he even deceived himself. He didn't believe it and asked, "Holy monk, did you already see that this is a game set up by this old man?" Zhang Yang nodded smugly and explained, "I've known since you conjured a woman to seduce me. I can understand the appearance of tea and snacks out of thin air, but if a woman appears out of nowhere, then of course I have to be vigilant. But I still want to see what tricks you can pull off, so I will pretend to be a trick and cooperate with you. In that empty space, you showed me the inner thoughts of Wukong, Baji, and Xiaobailong, and I saw it was fake at a glance. If they want to kill me, I won't wait until now, and I still feel aggrieved in my heart. Have you ever thought about it? A Demon King's son Wukong, a Tianping Marshal Zhu Baji, and a West Blue Third Prince. If you have an opinion on a person, that person can still live till now. Besides, Wukong is the one who killed Tang Seng with a single stick. Baji and Xiaobailong wanted to kill me from the beginning, and later became my apprentices. Can they be willing if I don't have the ability?" The words of Yishi made Zen Master Wuchao speechless. He thought that Zhang Yang couldn't stand the temptation and didn't trust his apprentice. It turned out that he was acting in all this. Then he said to Zhang Yang, "Holy monk, since you passed the test and played with this old man, it proves that you really have the ability to go to the Western Heaven. Here I have collected a volume of Maha Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, a total of 54 sentences, a total of 270 crosses. If you encounter any demonic obstacles on the way to get the scriptures, just recite this Heart Sutra to keep the saints and monks safe." Quote. Zhang Yang went over and listened to Zen Master Wuchao recite it, and then nodded to indicate that he had written it down. After that, the three masters and apprentices bid farewell to Zen Master Wuchao and continued their journey westward. After walking for a while, Wukong asked suspiciously, "Bald donkey, did you really see the trick of the bird man?" Zhang Yang glanced back, and after seeing Wuchao, he breathed a sigh of relief, and explained, "I see, I was really frightened by him. When I saw your heart in the mirror, I was seriously. Later, when you came up, I heard the Birdman explain that I was played by him, so I thought of this, pretended to see it through, and then cured him." Wukong scolded, "My old grandson knows how smart you are, you stupid bald donkey, and you still attack us with a deadly hand. Is there anyone like you who is a master?" Zhang Yang was taken aback and asked, "Master? Oops, my monkey, you finally admit that I am your master. I'm so moved that I cry." Wukong hurriedly said, "Master, I just said it casually." At this time, Baji said, "Forget it, it's all over. In the future, if Master has the Heart Sutra, we won't need our protection." Zhang Yang was in a hurry and said quickly, "I need it." Then Zen Master Wuchao only recited the Heart Sutra once, and I didn't hear it clearly, but out of face, I had to give up. The crowd burst into laughter. Zhang Yang recalled the woman just now. His face was filled with peach blossoms, and the spring breeze was overflowing. He sighed, "This is the first time I have seen such a beautiful person. I really want to take her to study scriptures, but it is a fantasy, alas." Wukong shook his head, "Not necessarily." Zhang Yang stopped and asked, "Really? If it's a real person, I'll go back and take her away immediately. I'm just like her, how can I be an irresponsible man? Wukong said with certainty. Of course, the guess is that Birdman himself changed. After hearing this, Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, then leaned down and started to vomit wildly. While vomiting, he said in an air, "Go, come back with me." Vomit. I copied that Birdman's nest. Baji walked over to help him up and comforted him. Forget it, master, what are you complaining about after you have done everything? Zhang Yang burst into tears. I am sorry for the king of the daughter country. I lost my body before I arrived, and I lost my body to a wretched birdman. I don't live anymore. Come and take me to the west sky now. Chapter 450, The Talking Rabbit. After Zen Master Wu Chao said goodbye, Zhang Yang had not thought about female sex for a long time, and he was unhappy and lacking energy all day. In addition to the psychological shadow, he was still thinking that this way of learning was really boring, and he knew exactly what monsters he encountered afterward, and these monsters could not hurt him, which was really boring. So for the past 2 days, he has been thinking about whether to accept a female apprentice or something, otherwise, it will be very boring with these strange guys all the way. Thinking of this, he wanted to ask the apprentices, opinions. You said, marry a teacher for the master. I'm sorry, I made a slip of the tongue. I mean, how about accepting a female apprentice? Wukong ignored him and walked in front alone. Baji led the horse and turned around and said, Master, it's better for you to give up female sexuality. Since you have converted to my Buddha, you should still obey the rules. Zhang Yang was not happy after hearing this, and retorted, who has taken refuge? I don't believe in Buddhism, and I just take scriptures to save all sentient beings. But this can't be a shackle that binds me, I just want to pick up girls. Pick up a girl? Baji asked inexplicably. What is a puppy? Do you soak a girl in water? Zhang Yang shook his head. It's just about falling in love. Anyway, I have to stay with a woman. Baji asked, why? Zhang Yang tapped his head, restrained his anger, leaned down and whispered a few words in his ear. Baji shouted in surprise, Master, you can't get up from below. Master, you are useless. The blue veins on Zhang Yang's forehead are about to protrude. He clenched his fists and asked, why are you so loud? Baji touched his back and said, don't be impatient, calm down, you can't beat me if you're angry. Zhang Yang sighed and said helplessly, I guess that bird man made him impotent, so I wanted to find a woman to see if I could get up again. Monkeys are made of stones, I don't understand this. Xiao Beilong is tall, rich and handsome, and he has seen a lot of beauties around him. 1 Chang'e and 3 young ladies are loved. I am an old bachelor. If I don't accept it, I will accept a female apprentice. Baji said, then you take it. I see that there is nothing in this wilderness except the female goblin. Zhang Yang said unconvincingly, it's okay to be a female fairy, you are too embarrassed to say that a female fairy, aren't you also a pig monster? Can you not discriminate against others? While Zhang Yang was talking to Baji, Wukong was walking in front of him, when a light wind suddenly hit his face. He moved his nose to sniff the smell in the air, frowned, there was a fishy smell in the wind, I'm afraid there is something weird ahead. After Wukong expressed his worries, he signaled everyone to be careful, but Zhang Yang didn't care. At this time, there was a sinister high mountain in front of them, and the mountain was filled with fog, and it seemed that disaster must be here. Wukong said he went to explore the way, let them wait here, and then set off first. And Zhang Yang was thinking in his heart, what difficulties would it be after leaving Zen Master Wu Chao? But he thought about it, it seems that this journey is different from the original writing in Journey to the West, and he has no need to think about it at all. Baji, I'm so hungry, let's go get some game to eat first. Zhang Yang rubbed his stomach and said, let's walk forward a little, Wukong can find us. Baji thought to himself that although Brother Monkey had instructed to wait for him here, but now that Master is hungry, he had no choice but to solve his urgent needs first. After that, Baji asked Zhang Yang to wait here, and he went in to hunt game by himself. Not long after Baji left, Zhang Yang saw a rabbit jumping out of the grass. He hurriedly jumped off the horse, and then let the white dragon horse go catch the rabbit. Who knew that? Bai Longma shook his head and said angrily, whoever likes to go will go. Zhang Yang stalked and said, don't, I'm still angry because of what happened last time. I apologized one by one. You dignified third prince of West Blue, don't have the same knowledge as me, right? I am too hungry to bear. Bai Longma stopped talking, turned to face Zhang Yang with his horse's butt, and protested with actions. Zhang Yang punched the horse's butt and had to do it himself. He picked up the stone that was easy to use, and then quietly moved towards the little rabbit. As a result, when he was less than 3 meters away from the little rabbit, a black shadow suddenly appeared from the opposite side of him, and the little rabbit was smashed with one bite. Bite in the mouth. Zhang Yang looked up and saw a tiger in front of him. The tiger also saw Zhang Yang, stretched out his claws and grabbed his chest, took off the tiger's skin, and turned into a human-shaped monster. The goblin threw the little rabbit on the ground and said excitedly, Tang Sang. The monk who learned the scriptures. I heard that eating a piece of your meat can make you live forever. Ha ha, as long as I give you to the king, I will be promoted and rich. Zhang Yang rolled his eyes at him and said impatiently, hurry up and hand over the rabbit, or don't blame me for being rude. The monster is also a tender, and he has never seen such a mad monk, but when he thought about what rabbit he wanted when he got it, he picked up the rabbit and threw it to Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang picked up the little rabbit and found that it was still alive, panting violently. Zhang Yang looked over and over to see the wound on its body. The monster had bitten a row of tooth marks on its stomach, and its white hair was stained with blood. Forget it, Zhang Yang thought that as long as he didn't die for too long, he could still eat. Just as he was holding the little rabbit and turned around to look for dry wood to start the fire, he heard a clang sound behind him. He looked back and saw that the monster was shaking with 2 copper knives in his hands. What are you? The monster asked. This is the great sun Tathagata Vajra cover, are you scared? Go back quickly if you are scared, don't stay here, be careful that my apprentice will come back and kill you. Zhang Yang said. I don't believe it. The monster raised the bronze knife again and slashed towards Zhang Yang's head, but it still slashed on the golden bell. He kept slashing until the vibrations from the collision between the bronze knife and the golden bell continued to reach him. In his body, all his internal organs bleed, and finally the 7 orifices bleed, and he fell to the ground and died. Zhang Yang shook his head and said with a pity, Amitabha, everyone has seen it. I didn't do anything at all, so I can't blame me. After speaking, he walked towards the monster's body. Just as he went to search for the monster when there was nothing valuable on his body, a girl's voice suddenly came from his arms. Thank you for saving me. Zhang Yang saw that the little rabbit in his arms was actually speaking, and he hurriedly asked, Are you a goblin? The little rabbit replied, I'm just a rabbit practicing in Wangfangling, not a fairy. Now it's hard to do Zhang Yang. Seeing that this rabbit can talk, he is still thanking himself. How can he eat it? But he had no choice but to think of a way to save the rabbit's life. Eat something, wait for Baji to come back. Chapter 451. The Golden Bell That Failed. Zhang Yang was far away from the foot of the mountain and found a stream. After cleaning the wounds for the little rabbit, he planned to let her go back. As a result, the little rabbit jumped back to Zhang Yang's feet and said reluctantly, You saved my life, I want to go with you and find a chance to repay my gratitude. Although Zhang Yang was very moved, he still rejected her kindness. You're so young, it's not enough for me to stick between my teeth, let's forget it. When you grow up a little bit more meat, come back and repay me. The little rabbit was not convinced, jumped into Zhang Yang's arms, and said, I don't believe you will eat me, you are a good person. Zhang Yang put it on the ground again and said, Don't follow me. Be careful when my apprentice comes back. He likes to eat snacks like yours. The moment he turned around, there was a feeling of wind blowing behind him, and the next second, he saw a smooth and white hand sticking out from the back of his neck, holding a bone knife in his hand. Was hitting the artery in his neck. The golden bell only flashed for a moment, then disappeared again, and Zhang Yang realized that there was something wrong with the rabbit just now. At this time, the voice of the rabbit came from behind him. As expected, it is a holy monk who went to the west to learn scriptures. He can kill my pioneer without taking action. With such a cultivation base, it seems that it is also said that eating a piece of your meat can make you live forever. Really? If the rabbit demon was outside the golden bell hood, Zhang Yang might be interested in having a good chat with her, but now that her knife was on his neck, Zhang Yang didn't dare to talk nonsense. In addition, he was too lazy to explain the question of Tang Sang. Just a little curious, why didn't the golden bell hood block her? Recalling the situation that the golden bell hood appeared a few times before, when I first came to the world of Journey to the West and fell from the air, the second time was when Wukong hit him with the golden hoop, and the third time was when Baji took 9 when the spikes hit him, the fourth time was when the poor little demon with the copper knife slashed him. It seems that the golden bell hood will only appear when he is in danger, but there are also special cases, that is, when he met the little white dragon. Zhang Yang clearly remembered that after the little white dragon shook his hand, he turned into a sword and stabbed him. At that time, the golden bell hood didn't respond at all. If it wasn't for Wukong's quick rescue, Zhang Yang might have been killed by Xiao Beilong at that time. The current situation is somewhat similar to that of the little white dragon. The rabbit demon shoots from behind and can use a knife to put a knife on his neck when he is very close. It only means that the golden bell will not appear at close range. Reaction. There is also a situation when Zhang Yang didn't realize the danger. At that time, Xiao Beilong shook hands with him. He didn't realize that he would kill him, and the same was true for this rabbit demon. Take action without warning. After a series of reasoning and thinking, Zhang Yang was confused. This golden bell turned out to be flawed. He cursed inwardly, it would be nice to give me an iron shirt directly. At this time, the rabbit demon said, okay, since you have been surrendered by me, now go back to the mountain with me to find the king. Zhang Yang hurriedly shook his head when he heard it. What are you in a hurry? My 2 apprentices will come back in a while, take them with them, and eat monkey brains and pig trotters, isn't it beautiful? Who knew that the rabbit demon laughed and said, ha ha ha, you are still waiting for your 2 precious apprentices, they will never want to come out of the yellow sand desert in this life. The yellow sand desert. Zhang Yang looked at the steep mountains in front of him and asked, where is the desert? Didn't they enter the mountains? Anyway, you are not far from death, then I will show you the ability of my king. No one can get out of his yellow sand desert, said the rabbit demon and pushed Zhang Yang to the foot of the mountain. In one step, they were on the way up the mountain, and they stopped. The rabbit demon pushed Zhang Yang's head forward, and Zhang Yang felt as if a transparent film had appeared in front of him. When his head completely passed through the film, his eyes lit up, and a huge desert appeared in front of him. Before. The previous high mountains are gone, replaced by the endless yellow sand desert. Taking advantage of the fact that he could still speak, Zhang Yang shouted loudly, Wukong, Baji, help. Then he felt a pull behind him, pulling him back sharply, and his head pierced through the membrane again. The bunny asked, what were you shouting just now? I didn't shout, I didn't see clearly, you let me see and see. Speaking of which, Zhang Yang shoved his head into the film, and the vast desert was in front of him again, and he pulled his mouth again. Shouted, stinky monkey, smelly pig, help. As a result, he was pulled back again, and then the rabbit demon used a spell to conjure a rope to tie him into a zongzi. Zhang Yang finally turned his head and saw the rabbit demon in front of him. He stared at her in awe, and said slowly, you are so beautiful. The bunny demon blushed, turned around, took one end of the rope and pulled Zhang Yang to the other side of the mountain. Seeing that this is not good, Zhang Yang hurriedly shouted to the white dragon horse who was gnawing on the grass happily, help, my 3rd prince of West Blue, my dragon palace is tall and rich and handsome, please help me as a teacher. Bai Longma looked at Zhang Yang, gasped from his nose, and said helplessly, I'm just a horse, what else can I do? He finally learned how small Bai Longma's mind is, and he doesn't even care about Wukong and Baji, but now he sees death and does not help, it is simply rebellious. Seeing that the white dragon horse didn't respond, the rabbit demon continued to pull Zhang Yang up the mountain. Zhang Yang prayed hard. My little beauty, stop first, what are you doing in such a hurry? What's your name? The bunny said in a low voice without turning his head, Shuiye. Shuiye, my beautiful Shuiye, can you just stay away? Zhang Yang shouted. Who knew that Shuiye really didn't leave? She turned her head, slapped Zhang Yang's face, and scolded, shameless monk, mad, if you say something inappropriate, I'll hit you again. A slap. As she said that, 2 teardrops ran down her face. Looking at her blushing face, Zhang Yang thought it was cute. Anyway, what could a slap be? He shouted again, my dear Shuiye, you just. Another slap. Zhang Yang's face was slapped red, but his heart was full of joy, and he finally met a good-looking female fairy along the way. It really pays off, to be able to see such a beautiful female fairy. He is willing to be slapped as many times as he wants. Share, my beautiful share. Stinky bastard, I'll kill you. Stop, that's enough, you've beaten me up. Chapter 452, Man-Eating Desert. Looking at Zhang Yang who was fanned into a pig's head by herself, Shuiye burst into laughter with a poochie. She wiped away her tears, and dragged Zhang Yang to continue walking into the mountains. At this time, Zhang Yang didn't play with her anymore, and instantly transformed into flames from within his body, cutting the rope. Shuiye was surprised to conjure up a knife to prepare for self-defense, but Zhang Yang rubbed his face and waved his hands, saying, okay, go back quickly, tell your king, don't give me advice, or he will have good fruits to eat. Shuiye saw the strange knife floating beside Zhang Yang, and did not dare to act rashly, so she could only say, You wait, I will ask my king to clean you up, huh? She then turned around and ran back. Because I was too anxious to look at the road, I had already passed half of my body through the transparent film. Seeing this, Zhang Yang hurried forward and grabbed Shuiye's hand, but he didn't know whether it was because Shuiye was too heavy or because Zhang Yang's feet were unstable. He was pulled in, and the two rolled into the yellow sand together. In the desert, Zhang Yang and Shuiye hugged and rolled from the sand dunes to the end. Shuiye opened her eyes first, and saw that she had entered this desert. She sat on the ground in a trance, looking at the desert that was not very marginal, and even her breathing became short. Just then, a hand reached out from the sand under her, and Cher jumped up in fright. After she ran away, she looked back and saw a person slowly crawling out of the desert. It was a bald monk in a cassock. Zhang Yang took a bite of the sand, coughed and spit out all the sand in his mouth, then he looked at Shuiye not far away, then looked at the surrounding situation, sighed, and then he shouted to Shuiye, I said, did you design this in advance? Now that I'm trapped here, you can quickly ask your king to take me out, and I'll just let him eat. Shuiye did not speak, but squatted on the ground, crying silently. Seeing her like this, Zhang Yang got up from the ground, walked up to her, and asked, why are you crying? It's obviously me who is going to be eaten, okay. I'm not in a hurry to cry. Cher shook his head and said, we can't get out, no one can get out here. Zhang Yang's mind paused for half a minute, then he shook his head vigorously to wake himself up, and asked, impossible, if this desert was created by your king, he would definitely be able to come in and go out. You can contact us now. Him. Shuiye said. No way, our Wangfengling monsters have never dared to step into this yellow sand desert. Many monsters have accidentally broken in. The king only held a morning event for them. The king said, even he can't get out here, let alone us. After listening to her, Zhang Yang thought for a while, and then asked again, then did your king say you must eat my meat? Shuiye nodded and said, he said that he must eat Tang Seng's flesh in order to live forever, so that he can be free forever. So when we found out that you have come here, we took Tiger Pioneer and me to inquire about you. Strength, I didn't expect that just in time for your apprentices to enter the yellow sand desert, we dared to come out and plan to arrest you. Quote. Hearing this, Zhang Yang understood. It was obvious that this so-called king was deceiving these little demons. If he had to eat Tang monk meat, why would he set up the yellow sand desert so dangerously? If Tang Seng accidentally entered here, wouldn't he never be able to eat him? No matter what the reason is to deceive the little demons, this king will definitely be able to come in and go out. Maybe he is aware that he is coming in now, and maybe he will appear soon. Zhang Yang cheered up and was ready to fight at all times, but now he still has a question: what is the origin of your king? Shuiyi said, we don't know either, we just heard from the old demons that he came from far away and has the ability to bring people into the desert, and he threw all the demon kings here before. Here, after so long, maybe the bones have turned into powder. After he ruled here, he was very good to the little demons, but the king would often drink by himself, so he must be missing someone. Who is not sad? Even when Baji was in Jalaozhuang, he stared at the moon every day in a daze, sitting for one night. Zhang Yang dared to say that no one in the world was more infatuated than him. As soon as he thought of Baji, Zhang Yang immediately remembered that his 2 apprentices were also here, and now the top priority is to find them. Zhang Yang pondered for a long time, and suddenly came up with a plan. He asked Shuiyi if she could ignite the spell, and Shuiyi said yes. Then Zhang Yang took off his clothes and piled them on the ground. Seeing this, Shuiyi hurriedly covered her face and scolded, "Stinky rascal! You still do this kind of thing, haven't you been beaten enough by me?" Zhang Yang explained helplessly, "My aunt, you can fight whatever you want. The plan for now is to find my 2 apprentices first. There are so many people and great strength, maybe everyone can think of a way to get out of here. I undress so you can set your clothes on fire and smoke will come out so they can see in the distance. Besides, I haven't stripped naked, so there's still some panties left." Shuiyi quietly opened her fingers and saw that Zhang Yang was still wearing pants. Although she was very unhappy, she also wanted to go out, so she used a spell to set Zhang Yang's pile of cassocks on fire. The smoke that ignited was very small, and it did not rise straight up into the sky. Zhang Yang saw that it was broken, so he hurriedly put out the fire with his feet, and then said, "This method is not good, you need to burn with wolf dung to speak bluntly. Alas, my only cassock, if Guanyin finds out, will it take care of me?" Shuiyi was also at a loss. She asked, "What should I do now? I'm a little thirsty." Zhang Yang roared, "How do I know? I'm thirsty too, auntie. I ate a mouthful of sand when I came in, and now my throat is full of sand. What do you want me to do? It's all your fault. Let you go home obediently. I have to run here, alas." Quote. Shuiyi lowered her head and stopped talking. She felt that she could no longer get out and fell into despair. Zhang Yang knew that his words were a little heavy, and just wanted to comfort her a few words, but he heard a voice coming from a distance. He touched Shuiyi's head, then pointed to the far end, and said, "I think I know why your king is mourning for those little demons who came in by mistake. There are monsters here." Cher raised his head and looked in the direction of his fingers, and saw a huge black shadow churning in the desert. "Move over. What are you in a daze? Run." Zhang Yang pulled Shuiyi and started to run for his life. Chapter 453, Desert Worm. It is said that after Wukong entered the yellow sand desert, he realized that he was in the game, so he had to fly around in the desert with a golden hoop, looking for a way out. However, this yellow sand desert is always just an illusion, and there is no way out at all. Wukong gave up the idea of leaving after flying for a while. Having just left the foggy forest illusion of Zen Master Huachao, and now he is in the desert illusion, Wukong was a little impatient. This smash was broken. The monster that had been sleeping in the desert for thousands of years was awakened. It opened its blood-red eyes and began to slowly wriggle its huge body, moving towards the top of the desert. After Wukong let out his anger also subsided a lot. After thinking about it, he should find a way out. He had an idea, pulled out a monkey hair, and turned into more than 100 little monkeys, making them move towards the monkey. The desert moves in all directions, so there is a greater chance of finding a way out. As soon as he gave an order, the monkeys began to move, and Wukong conjured a plantain fan and inserted it in the desert, and then lay down comfortably to enjoy the shade. Let's talk about Baji. After he entered the yellow sand desert, he didn't feel as good as Wukong. The scorching sun was scorching hot and there was only endless sand. Whether it was physically or psychologically, he was extremely tortured. In addition to being thirsty and hot, he was almost exhausted after sweating, relying solely on mana to maintain his body functions. After walking in the desert for a while, Baji couldn't hold it any longer and fainted on the ground, vaguely feeling a humming sound coming from his ears. I didn't expect my old pig to have hallucinations. Baji laughed at himself. Brother Monkey doesn't know where he is, and there is no one to save me. It's really desperate. Just as he was complaining, he suddenly noticed that the ground was shaking violently, and Baji said, "Is this hallucination a little too real?" As soon as he got up from the ground, he found that the sand around him was actually spinning, making him dizzy and almost vomiting. Seeing that something was bulging in the sand, Baji hurriedly took out a 9-toothed nail rake, and then flew into the air, away from the quicksand under his feet. The quicksand was still spinning violently, and Baji wanted to stay away from it, but he didn't expect that the quicksand would actually move with him. Wherever Baji flew, it would follow. This annoyed Baji. He scolded, "Your grandmother is a leg. Don't pretend to be a ghost, come out for your grandpa pig, otherwise it will make you look good." I don't know if Baji's words angered the person under the quicksand, but all the sand vacated by the swirling airflow from the quicksand flew towards Baji. Baji took a bite of the sand. He concluded that there was something strange under the sand, so he raised the 9-toothed rake and smashed it down. After the nail rake collided with the surface of the quicksand, the entire vortex of quicksand was shaken by countless gravels, and under the rolled-up countless gravels, a huge mouth could be seen sticking out of the desert, and Baji just happened to be there. On its tongue. Just before the giant mouths full of fangs were about to merge, Baji raised his legs and jumped up to avoid the bad luck of being eaten. Immediately after, a huge worm-shaped monster emerged from the desert. Its body was almost as big as 7 or 8 people holding hands and held it into a circle. It had red tiny eyes and dense white fluff on its skin. With a pair of dragon horns and 4 claws, it is almost exactly the same as a dragon. But this guy is much bigger than the dragon, and Baji knows that he can't beat it, so he has no choice but to spread his feet and use the strength of milk to run. As Baji ran, the worms behind him continued to chase, and soon he saw a little monkey not far from the desert that was looking towards him. "Brother Monkey, the old pig is here," Baji shouted as he ran towards the monkey. Wukong, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes, rolled his eyes for a while, and then jumped into the air and rushed in the direction of Baji. Baji soon met the little monkey. He ran and asked, "Where is my monkey brother?" The little monkey was also running and said to him, "Why don't I show you the way?" Baji's speed was faster. The little monkey couldn't run anymore, so he could only stop. Baji looked back and saw that the worm opened its big mouth, which was spraying with stench, and swallowed the little monkey. Baji closed his eyes and ran away with his head covered. At this moment, he really regretted the pig. Why didn't my mother give birth to a few legs when she gave birth to him? From a distance, Wukong saw the huge body of the worm, and Baji, who was panting with exhaustion in front of it. He threw up the golden hoop, made it spin in the air, and kicked the top of the golden hoop. Kicked the golden cudgel towards the worm. I saw that the golden hoop rod suddenly became as huge as the worm when it was less than a few meters away from the worm, and hit the worm's head heavily, knocking out several of its fangs. Seeing the huge stick on top of his head, about to fall down, Baji turned a corner and ran to the side. After the two brothers met, Wukong asked, "Idiot, what's going on?" Baji was so tired that he slumped on the ground, sweating like rain, panting and explaining, "I don't know, this big bug just came out of the ground, but luckily the old pig ran fast, otherwise it would definitely give it to him." Swallowed. Wukong reduced the golden hoop stick, then took it back into his hand, and continued to ask, "What about the bald donkey? Why are you the only one?" Baji said, "Master was hungry, so I went into the mountain to find something to eat. I didn't expect that just after walking 2 steps, I found that the surrounding environment had changed, and I came to this desert by myself. Nowhere. Wukong said. My old grandson is like this too. He came here in the blink of an eye. Do you know how to get out? Baji sighed and said in tears, how do I know, or I'll go out earlier. The two of them didn't rest for a long time when they saw the worm twisting its body and slamming its head down into the desert. Wukong didn't want to let it run away, so he flew over with the golden hoop stick, but it was a step too late, and the whole body of the worm had completely burrowed into the desert. He smashed the ground a few times, feeling bored, and walked over to Baji. As a result, before he took 2 steps, the worm suddenly came out from under his feet. It happened to be head up, swallowed Wukong in one mouthful, rose up in the air and fell back to the ground, stirring up the dust, and it was all over the place. Without intending to digest it, he twisted his body and swam towards Baji. Seeing Brother Monkey being swallowed into the monster's belly with his own eyes, Baji was dumbfounded. He only took a few breaths, and then he had to pat his butt to get up and start running away. But now Brother Monkey has been swallowed, and Baji is about the same. He was about to resist, so he threw the 9-toothed nail rake into the air. Chapter 454, War of Worms. The 9-toothed nail rake turned into a water demon of the Tianhe River in the air, and Baji's heart was cold when he saw it. If the worm was compared to the size of a golden hoop, the river water demon was like chopsticks that day. As Baji ran, he shouted, "Don't be brave if you can't beat it." After all, the Tianhe water demon is also an ancient mythical beast in the Milky Way in the sky. It still has some abilities. I saw it soar into the air, split from the original 9 heads and 1 body, and turned into 9 heads and 9 bodies, attacking the giant worm. They rushed to the side of the giant worm, charged into its body in all directions, and rushed out of the body on the other side, pulling strips of green blood. The worm howled in pain, as if the body was eroded by 9 parasites, and the pain was unbearable. Seeing the worms rolling on the ground, rolling up thousands of feet of dust, Bajia stopped in a hurry. The strength of the 9-headed water monster surprised him. It was really clever and resourceful to be able to split 9 bodies and continuously penetrate the body of the giant worm. But when he thought that Wukong was still in the worm's belly, Baji hurriedly shouted to the 9-headed water demon, "Be careful, don't hurt my monkey brother." However, Wukong, who was in the worm's esophagus at this time, felt that the worm was attacked by something. This was an opportunity. When he was about to enlarge the golden hoop to pierce the worm's stomach, he saw Baji's 9-toothed nail rake really the body penetrated from the outside, and came to Wukong's side along the esophagus. Wukong turned around and flew into the air, landed on the water demon, and then grabbed the hair on the water demon's head. Immediately after, the water demon took off and hit the wall of the esophagus, and drilled out of the worm's stomach again. After Wukong got out of the worm's body, he jumped off the water demon and came to Baji's side. Baji asked, "Brother Monkey, are you alright?" Wukong shook his head. "I'm fine, that monster has a lot of room in its stomach, and my old grandson has nothing to do." Baji looked at Wukong, and then said with confidence, "That's good, Brother Monkey, what do you say now?" Wukong saw that the worm was being restrained at this time, and it was just an opportunity to kill it in one fell swoop, so he said, "Baji, you stay here, and the rest will be left to my grandson." Just when Wukong lifted the golden hoop and flew to the worm also had some other actions. It made the fluff on the skin of the body black and thick, and then stuck to the surface of the skin, forming an orderly row. Hard armor. Now Baji's Tianhe water demon couldn't penetrate the worm's body, so he could only reunite and return to Baji's side as a 9-toothed nail rake. Wukong knew that the surface of the worm could not penetrate, so he could only find the weakest part of its body, which was its mouth. It seems that he has to go into its belly again. Wukong pushes the golden cudgel with his hand and rushes towards the worm's mouth, and the worm also opens its bloody mouth and prepares to devour Wukong. At this moment, the golden cudgel in Wukong's hand it became thin and long in an instant, pierced into the belly of the worm like a needle, and then passed through the mouth, at the other end of his body. After that, Wukong stood on the head of the worm, holding the end of the golden hoop with his hand, and began to stir vigorously. The worm's body also twisted with the stirring of the golden hoop, and soon the internal organs and intestines in its stomach were mixed into a muddy flesh. It struggled several times and fell to the ground, leaking a stench from its mouth. The green pus, the body gradually shrunk down. Baji ran over and was full of praise. "Brother Monkey, you are really amazing." Wukong smiled triumphantly. "There is no monster in this world that I can't kill." Just when they were laughing, they didn't know that the undercurrent was surging under the desert, and what Wukong killed was just one of the worms. Under the yellow sand desert, there were several giant worms hidden, even one the size of 1.3 times bigger than the dead one. After a while, the commotion from under the desert once again attracted the attention of the brothers and sisters, and they took their weapons and became vigilant. On the other hand, Zhang Yang dragged Shui and ran wild in the desert, and they were also chased by a giant worm behind them. But worms in the desert are like fish in water, very fast. Zhang Yang looked back while running, and found that the worm was getting closer and closer to him. He knew that he could not escape, so he could only face it head-on. Zhang Yang let go of Shui's hand and turned to face the worm. Looking at its huge mouth full of fangs, Zhang Yang's body burst out with white steam. He imagined the flowing blade in his body like fire, and then turned to face Shui's son Vivi Isho. "Don't worry, you will be fine with your brother." After saying this, Zhang Yang was swallowed into the worm's stomach. Shui covered her mouth and almost cried. She had never seen such a terrifying monster before, and she was so frightened that she couldn't even escape. The worm continued to twist and move towards Shui, and then opened her mouth to swallow her. Just when Shui thought she was dead, she saw some changes in the worm's body. It stopped with its mouth open, and then a few white lights burst out from its body instantly. The next second, the worm's body was dismantled into 8 pieces by something, turning into pieces of meat and scattered. "Come down, fall hard to the ground." Among the piles of worm wreckage, Zhang Yang was covered in green blood from worms, carrying a knife with a white light on his shoulders, and was walking towards Shui step by step shirtless. Shui didn't expect Zhang Yang to have such a strong ability. She was about to ask him how he did it, when she saw Zhang Yang put a hand on Shui's mouth, and then her mouth bulged, and she immediately crouched down. Vomited. Zhang Yang complained while vomiting. "This guy's stomach is so stinky, I really don't know what to eat every day." Shui looked at the worm's body, suddenly thought of something, and said solemnly, "I seem to have seen this monster somewhere." "Where is it?" Cher fell into memory, and soon she remembered that the king had a silk handkerchief with a picture embroidered on it. The picture was exactly this worm, but strangely, in front of the worm in the picture, came to stand she was wearing a weak woman in red plain clothes. It was a pity that the woman's face was not shown on it. Shui has seen the king take out the handkerchief many times to look at the picture drawn on it, but he has never seen him use the handkerchief. It seems that the woman above must have something to do with the king. Seeing Shui in a daze, Zhang Yang wiped his mouth with his arm, and then said to her, "It's getting dark, let's find a place to rest first. The desert climate is not like the outside, unpredictable, the heat at noon will burn people it's cooked, but the temperature is so cold at night that it can freeze people to death, and I don't have any clothes now, so I need to find a place to stay quickly." After speaking, Zhang Yang took Lu Ren Ruahuo back into his body and walked in front of Shui. Chapter 455, Brothers Join Forces. Perhaps the worst thing in the world right now is that after Wukong and Baji killed one worm, 10 more worms came to surround them. These 10 worms of similar size rolled around, trapped Wukong and Baji in a circle from the surrounding city, and the dust billowed up, not only blocking their sight, but also making them unable to breathe. Wukong's eyes were tempered in Taishang Laojun's gossip furnace as early as 500 years ago, and it was burning and smoking. Naturally, this level of sand and dust had no effect on him. As long as he narrowed his eyes a little, you can still see what's going on around you. However, Baji couldn't take it anymore. The sand had already got into his eyes, making him itchy and painful. He had no choice but to squat down and protect his eyes with his hands. Seeing that the worms were approaching, Wukong simply retracted the golden hoop into his ear, and used a transformation technique to make his body continue to expand and grow bigger. Soon, Wukong's body became about the size of these worms. He picked up Baji with one hand and rushed towards the worms. Wukong guarded Baji with one hand and used the other hand as his foot. He ran to a worm on the ground, and then slammed the erected worm to the ground. Then the worm next to him twisted his body and opened his mouth to bite at him. Wukong shrank his arm and let the worm pounce in the air, and then he slammed his fist into the worm's face, causing it to spit and fall to the ground. Soon the surrounding worms moved over, and Wukong had broken through a way out at this time, no longer entangled them, and quickly ran out of the encirclement. Just after he ran for a while, two of the worms chasing behind him got under the desert. Their speed in the sand increased several times, and soon overtook Goku to the front of him. The desert in front of Wukong continued to bulge, and then two worms burst out of the sand. He patted his ear with his hand, shook the golden hoop out of his ear, and then became huge in the air. The figure just matched. He squeezed the golden hoop and swung it hard at the two worms in front of him. A huge golden hoop hit the worms, breaking them directly, separating the head and body, and spraying green blood. Wukong threw the golden hoop forward, and then he ran with one hand and two legs together. After he used the explosive speed to shake off the worms behind him for a long distance, he just reached the place where the golden hoop fell. Wukong put Baji behind him, then stretched out his hand to take the falling golden cudgel, and ran towards the remaining 8 worms with his feet. Baji's 9-toothed nail rake is originally a water demon of the Tianhe River, which is connected to the water of the Milky Way. It has the ability to transport water into its own body, otherwise it will die if it stays away from the water of the Tianhe River for a long time. So at this time, the top of the 9-toothed nail rake began to spray water from the Tianhe River to help Baji clean his eyes, and soon he saw the sun again. When he saw Wukong was fighting against the worms, he hurriedly took a stance, showing his true form and turning into a black-haired wild boar with hard fangs. Then he casts another spell to make his body about the size of a worm, and rushes to help Wukong. At this time, Wukong had killed 3 more worms with the golden hoop rod, and the worms seemed to be provoked and launched a more rapid attack on him. Wukong did not pay attention to his back, and was bitten by a worm on the shoulder. Just when he was about to turn around and throw the worm away, he found Baji rushing over from the side. Baji slammed into the worm behind Wukong, pierced its body with his hard fangs, and shook his head, and the worm was thrown out. The two brothers acted together. Wukong grabbed the head of a worm with one hand, stepped on the body of a worm with one foot, and hit the head of the worm running towards him with the other hand waving a golden cudgel, knocking it out. Brains burst out. On the other hand, Baji used his fangs to pierce 2 worms. Green blood splattered everywhere, and they died instantly. After fighting like this for a while, there was still 1 worm left. Just when Wukong was about to deal with it, the worm dived into the desert and disappeared. It was dark now, and the 2 brothers who had recovered to their original form sat on the ground, almost exhausted. Baji couldn't figure out why the last worm escaped, so he analyzed, could it be because of the darkness? Wukong shook his head and said, I don't know, it is possible that someone is controlling them. I feel that these beasts have a high IQ, know how to work in teams, and can surround their prey and attack from front to back. Baji took off his shoes and shook off the sand inside. He looked around and asked, Brother Monkey, what should we do next? Where are we going? Wukong thought for a while and said, let's take a good rest first. Now I don't know whether the bald donkey was captured by the monster or he also came into this strange place. Let's think of a way when it's dawn. Baji nodded, and now that's all he can do. In the middle of the night, there was no sound in the desert, and it was terribly silent. The moon hung in the sky. Baji looked at the moon that was twice as big as usual, thinking about Chang'e, and slowly fell asleep. And although Wukong had closed his eyes long ago, he was actually dozing off. During the day, the more than 100 monkeys he released had eaten some of the worms, and the few remaining were still looking for a way out in the desert. However, one of the monkeys found the half-burned cassock, which Wukong recognized as Zhang Yang. Not long after that, another monkey found the corpse of a worm, which looked like it had been cut into pieces with a knife, and the death was very ugly. Wukong could see the picture he saw through the monkey's eyes. When he saw the wounds, Wukong thought of the weird knife in Zhang Yang's body. It seemed that Zhang Yang did come in here, but it shouldn't be life-threatening compared to the worm dying so badly. Not only that, but the footprints of two people, one big and one small, were found around the worm's body. Wukong let the monkey touch the footprints. He continued to rest, and after recovering his energy, he went to chase the bald donkey. On the other hand, Zhang Yang and Shuiye hid behind a hill to rest. Shuiye was a medicine and could use her power to keep out the cold, but Zhang Yang couldn't. In addition, he burned his cassocks and clothes, and now there is only one left on his body. Panties. Therefore, Zhang Yang was shivering from the cold, and his snot fell out. He sniffed hard, then hugged his body tightly, curled up on the ground, and waited for the day to come. Just when he closed his eyes and trembled, he suddenly felt someone hug him. He was about to look back, but a small hand pushed his face back. Shuiye's voice came from his ear, "Smelly monk, don't turn around." Chapter 456, Shares Memories. Zhang Yang was moved to tears. Miss Shuiye is really warm-hearted. She uses her body to keep me warm. I have nothing in return, so I can only promise with my body. Shuiye hugged Zhang Yang and did not speak. She had already taken off her clothes and used her body temperature to keep Zhang Yang warm. For a woman, if she has a skin-to-skin relationship with a man, it is bound to belong to this man her whole life. Originally, she wanted to give herself to the king, but Zhang Yang saved her life, and now she can't be ungrateful and must save him. But when she thought that she would be by the monk's side for the rest of her life, and that the monk was the one who was ordered to eat by the king, Shuiye could only cry silently, and she didn't know what to do. Seeing that Shuiye didn't speak, and her body was shaking, and she could vaguely hear her sobbing, Zhang Yang quickly comforted her. "Why are you crying? If you think this is inappropriate, then go away, I won't blame you." Shuiye pinched Zhang Yang's back with her fingers, and choked up, "I've already done this, so what if I leave now? The torn clothes are old no matter how they are mended, it's all your fault." Zhang Yang was happy when he heard it, and asked with a smile, "Why do you blame me for this? I'm serious, if you dislike me, get up. My physical fitness is actually good, I can carry it all night. You keep crying like this, I'm ashamed to make me cry." When he said this, Shuiye cried even more, clenched her little hands into fists and hammered him in the back, shouting, "I'm already yours, you're a bastard when you say such things." This time Zhang Yang was dumbfounded. When did she become his? Then he hurriedly asked, "You make it clear, just next to the body like this, and there is no such person, how can you become my person? I am a monk, and I have to go to learn scriptures. Don't scare me like this. If I get caught." Guanyin Bodhisattva heard it, how bad the influence was. Shuiye said, "When a man and a woman have skin-to-skin relationship, they will definitely be together. I don't care. In short, you can't leave me. If you go to learn scriptures, you must take me with you." It stands to reason that being entangled by a beautiful girl is not a good thing, but since Cher pretended to be an injured rabbit to deceive Zhang Yang, he didn't trust her very much. Who knows what she is paying attention to now? How could a goblin care so much about her chastity? Is it possible that you are making some wrong ideas again? The more Zhang Yang thought about it, the more wrong it became, so he moved forward twice and left Shuiye's body. He said, "Okay, I'm not cold anymore, put on your clothes, I want to chat with you." When Shuiye got dressed, Zhang Yang turned around and saw her head bowed and a blush on her face. She felt a little embarrassed. He coughed twice, then said, "You are actually a good girl, even if you want to be with me as a monk for the rest of your life. You are willing to come to warm me and save my life, which is enough to show your kindness. But I don't quite understand, you are so kind, why do you have to help the king to arrest me? Is it not against your goodness to eat my flesh?" Unexpectedly, Shuiye stared at Zhang Yang with an idiotic look on her face. She shook her head and asked, "Does everyone in the world say black and white in your eyes? Only when there is evil can you stand up, let alone a demon. Is it contradictory that I want to save you and dedicate you to the king?" After listening to Zhang Yang and pondering for a while, he suddenly realized and said, "So you saved me to feed your king, so I said why you are so kind. It really is the most poisonous woman's heart, women are so scary." Shui became anxious when he heard what he said, and scolded angrily, "You bastard, I have treated you like this, I must be yours, why would I hand you over to the king, am I that bad?" Zhang Yang said with a look of disbelief, "I don't think so. I feel that you must love your king very much. Why would you suddenly say that you belong to me? Aren't you from your king?" Cher wanted to justify a few words, but in the end she didn't say anything. She lowered her head and fell into her memories. When she was really a little rabbit who couldn't even speak, she was eating fresh weeds in the mountains one day, when suddenly a mountain wolf appeared from behind her and slapped her under its paws. The wolf opened its mouth, and the saliva fell to the ground along its teeth. Cher was so frightened that she almost fainted. Just when the wolf was about to swallow Cher, he appeared, he lifted the wolf easily, he threw the wolf aside, and the wolf choked a few times before getting into the woods and running away. He picked up the little rabbit, stroked her little head lightly with his hand, and brought her back to his place. Since then, Cher has grown up with the king, gradually becoming a humanoid, a king of costumes. The king likes to drink, and when he drinks, he likes to eat human flesh as a drink. He is a very affectionate person. When drinking and eating meat, he will greet the little demons around him. There are also female goblins, but he has never called him away. Cher recently. Shui couldn't understand. When everyone was drinking, she ran over and took the king's glass and drank it. Unexpectedly, the king stood up and slapped her face with a slap, and asked loudly, "Why are you drinking?" The little demons present were stunned. This was the first time they saw the king get angry, and the object of his anger was an unremarkable bunny. Shui was blinded at the time. The gentle king would actually make a big fuss about her. She was so frightened that she couldn't even speak. "I'm asking you something. Why drink without my permission? Who gave you the guts?" Shui still didn't speak. The king was so angry that his eyes were red. He dragged her into his bedroom angrily, and pushed her onto the bed. The king rushed up and pressed Shui under him, opened his mouth and stretched towards her neck, but in midair, he stopped trembling again. Shui kept her eyes closed, not knowing what the king was doing. When she felt something cold fall on her face, she quietly opened her eyes and saw the king who was choking in front of her. The king got up and sat by the bed, looked at Shui, and said softly to her, "Promise me, listen to me, and stay by my side forever, okay?" Shui nodded. "I will never leave you, I love you." The king was stunned for a while, his eyes were full of doubts and confusion. After he recovered, he said to her, "Never love me. What I need is freedom, not bondage. You, like her, want to lock me up." Cher didn't understand what he meant, but it was certain that she never seemed to get his heart. Chapter 457, Freedom is King. Seeing that Shui was in a daze, Zhang Yang patted her head and said, "Okay, don't think too much, have a good night's rest, and find a way to find some water to drink when you wake up tomorrow." Cher nodded, lay down and turned around, facing Zhang Yang. At this time, in the Wangfeng cave in Wangfengling, King Wangfeng was still anxiously sending people to look for Shui's figure, until a little demon came to report that he found the body of the tiger demon pioneer and a white horse at the foot of the mountain. "Find Cher." Huangfeng hurriedly ran down the mountain to check. There was only one way to enter the mountain, so Huangfeng would put the illusion of the yellow sand desert there. Right now, he looked at Hu Shanfeng's body, and knew that Hu Shanfeng and Shui were patrolling the mountain together today. He was already dead, and it seemed that Shui might be in danger. And the white horse indicated that it was the Tang monk who had arrived. Huangfeng slammed the tree with his fist, shaking the leaves so loudly that he was furious and scolded. "I clearly said that Tang Seng was to be caught by me, why don't you listen to me?" Seeing that the king was angry, the little demon under his command hurriedly reassured him. Don't be angry, King, maybe Shuiyi hasn't been found elsewhere. Huangfeng looked at the entrance of the yellow sand desert and was silent for a long time. He guessed that Shuiyi must have entered that fantasy world by mistake, and now he is the only one who can go in and bring her out. In fact, the anger is only for the little demons under his subordinates, to let them know how dangerous the yellow sand desert is, and they can't get out if they go in. In fact, Huangfeng can come in and out freely. He pretended to be sad and asked his subordinates to take the white horse back. He wanted to pay tribute to Shuiyi here. After waiting until there were no monsters around, Huangfeng hurriedly walked into the yellow sand desert. Somewhere in the desert, Wukong and Baji were still resting when suddenly a gust of wind blew and Wukong woke up. He stood up and looked around, his fiery eyes glowing golden in the dark night, but he saw nothing. The strange thing is that he has never felt wind in this desert since he came in. Why is the wind suddenly blowing at this moment? And there was a faint fishy smell in the wind, exactly the same as the smell Wukong smelled at the foot of the mountain for the first time. He lay down again, stared at him and became vigilant. It seemed that the monster had entered. Zhang Yang and Shuiyi in the other place also noticed the appearance of the wind. Unlike Zhang Yang's complaining attitude, Shuiyi seemed both happy and sad, because she knew that the king had come in, but she couldn't get out of the desert. Yes, what are you doing here, your majesty? Is it to save yourself? Zhang Yang couldn't stand the cold, but now it's better, and the wind is blowing. He knows that he can't curl up like this anymore, so he stood up and started doing push-ups. Cher looked at her strange movements and asked, "What are you doing?" Zhang Yang said while doing it, "This is called exercise. Kinetic energy generates heat, so I will warm up a bit." "You haven't slept yet?" Cher shook her head, "Can't sleep." Zhang Yang did 20 reps in one breath, then stood up and started doing squats. He said, "Yes, it's windy for no reason, no one can stand it." After he recovered a little energy, he thought of another way. He began to dig sand on the ground. After digging a hole just enough to accommodate him, he lay down and finally piled the surrounding sand on himself. Until only one head remains out of the sand. He said to Cher, "Sand can isolate the air conditioning outside and keep me warm. You can try it too." Shuiyi didn't want to bury herself like a fool, so she said, "No need, I can use magic power to keep out the cold." Zhang Yang is warm here, but Wukong and Baji over there are miserable. The wind around them is getting stronger and stronger, rolling up the sand. Wukong didn't sleep, so he woke up immediately. Baji slept soundly, but was also woken up by the wind. He squinted his eyes and said to Wukong, "Brother Monkey, there's something wrong with the wind. Why is it always surrounding us? Are those big bugs coming again?" Wukong tried to get out of the wind, but the wind was too strong, and he couldn't break through the wind wall of the cylinder in front of him. And as the wind speed is getting faster and faster, a tornado with a wide range is formed. Wukong and Baji are in the position of the eye of the wind, and a vacuum environment is almost formed here. They felt that their bodies were about to be torn apart. At this time, Wukong took out the golden hoop rod, then placed the golden hoop rod in front of his waist and started to rotate, in the opposite direction to the wind outside. In this way, one counterclockwise, one clockwise, Wukong's rotation speed is getting bigger and bigger, forming a green wind around him, gradually expanding, and competing with the tornado outside. Finally, Wukong's speed was faster than the tornado, completely offsetting it, breaking the tornado. After the wind stopped, the dust gradually fell, and the sight around them became clear again, and they finally saw a blurry black shadow not far away. Wukong said, "Where is the monster from? Dare to be presumptuous in front of your grandfather." Seeing that Wukong had broken his spell, Huangfeng sneered and said, "As expected of the great sage Monkey King who dares to make a fuss in the heavenly palace, he has some skills." When Wukong heard that he could call out his name, he said, "Since I know your grandfather, I don't want to kowtow and admit my mistake." Baji also added, "And your grandfather Pig. Marshal Tianpeng, Great Sage Monkey King, hee, they are all just dogs that obey people's orders." Huangfeng wrapped himself completely in his cloak, and he could only hear his voice coming from behind the cloak. Let you know what freedom is, king. Huangfeng turned himself into a transparent wind, and then blew up the surrounding sand and gravel, which condensed into the shape of a giant along the gust of wind, and made a deafening roar in this vast desert. Baji panicked and hurriedly asked, "Brother Monkey, this guy is a little too big, what should we do?" Wukong said, "He seems to be a monster made of wind. He has no entity and can't attack at all. Now we have to test it first and find his weakness." After listening to Baji, he began to use his power to transform. He said to Wukong, "Brother Monkey, my old pig will meet him, and you can observe his weaknesses with your sharp eyes." Wukong nodded. "Okay, be careful." Baji reappeared and turned into a huge wild boar. He scratched the sand with his hind legs, and then instantly rushed towards the yellow wind giant. Baji's brute force is no joke, and coupled with his pair of long, hard fangs, he can pierce almost anything. I saw that he slammed into the yellow wind giant, instantly smashing his huge body into a pile of loose sand. However, the scattered sand quickly condensed and reassembled into a yellow wind giant that appeared behind Bajia, and then kicked his ass, knocking him down. Chapter 458. I am the wind, you are the sand. Apart from Baji, he knocked the yellow wind giant apart by himself, but he did not expect to reunite so quickly. The kick on his butt made him furious. He roared and got up and continued to hit the yellow wind giant. This time, the yellow wind giant didn't plan to dodge, but raised his fist, condensing a lot of hard gravel on his fist, ready to smash at Baji. But just as he was about to smash down, a small black rope suddenly wrapped around his wrist and pulled him. It turned out to be the real body of the nine-toothed nail rake, and it has split into 9 snake body water demons. Their heads and tails are all connected together to form a rope long enough to hold the fist of the yellow wind giant and prevent him from attacking the master. Taking this opportunity, Baji used his fangs to stab into the yellow wind giant's body, then raised his head vigorously and pushed him into the air. At the same time, the 9-body snake demon transformed into a 9-toothed rake, which became several times larger, ready to attack the giant's head from above. At this moment, the yellow wind giant disintegrated completely. It was no longer in the shape of a person, but turned into a wind that could move freely. It flexibly avoided the 9-toothed nail rake, and then turned a big bend and hit Bajia's stomach. Knocked him to the point of foaming at the mouth. Baji was hit so weak that he could no longer maintain his huge stature, and turned back into a human form. Wukong has been observing the weakness of the yellow wind monster since just now, but after watching it for a long time, he found that he can change any shape arbitrarily. Even if he is attacked, there is no harm, especially if it is combined with the countless miles of the desert gravel as invincible and fearless. Speaking of weaknesses, there is also one, that is, his size is limited. The giant form should be the limit size, and will not exceed that size. But how to deal with him now? Wukong still can't figure it out. What is the thing in the world that can trap the wind? Seeing that Baji was in danger, Wukong rushed over and jumped into the air, then called somersaults in the air. He just landed on the cloud and flew towards the wind. Wukong waved his golden hoop stick and hit the wind to disperse it, but the wind is a natural thing after all, and his ability is not so simple. Huangfeng flew to the side and turned into a human form, and said to Wukong, "Monkey, surrender, you are not my opponent." Wukong was still in the air, ready to take another shot at any time. Dream in the day, you want to eat that bald donkey, but you have to figure out who you are fighting against. If God wants to accept you, you will surely die. Huangfeng laughed and said with a look of contempt, "Monkey King, after all, he used to be a demon king, and now he doesn't even need this dignity in order to save his life. You are really good." Wukong said, "My old grandson is just looking for his own answer." A look of surprise flashed in Huangfeng's eyes, and then he said slowly, "I'm just doing what I think is right." A long time ago, Huangfeng was just a wisp of wind, free to play in the world without any restraint. Until he came to a desert and encountered gravel dancing for him, he stopped. Huangfeng called her, Sure, he took her wherever he went, and the two were inseparable. Char said, I will always be by your side. Huangfeng said, I love you. However, most of the time, things backfired. Huangfeng couldn't take Char away. She was too big, so vast that she couldn't see the border. The unwilling Huangfeng used the Chenkin bag to pack the entire desert, so that he could take away the sand, but the demon originally imprisoned under the desert regained the sun because it was no longer bound by the sand. The terrifying demon is a disaster for the world. Char knew that Huangfeng had caused a big disaster, and asked him to use the Chenkin bag to collect the monster, but Char chose to keep it in the Chenkin bag forever in order to seal it under the desert again. Not come out. So Huangfeng's Chenkin bag has a dead desert. At first, he would often enter the yellow sand desert and call for Char, but he never got a response from Char. He didn't know if she was hiding on purpose, concerned about herself, or she has passed away. Over time, Huangfeng no longer entered the Chenkin bag, and he began to travel alone in the world. Accidentally came to the foot of a mountain and saw an old woman embroidering here, so he asked her to help embroider Char and the demon on a handkerchief. The mountain was later renamed Huangfengling, and Huangfeng stayed here, waiting for the arrival of the scriptures. Tang Seng is an eminent monk, and his cultivation is far more than Huangfeng. He thinks that he can bring Char back to life. If not, he will eat his flesh and find a way to revive Char by himself. So Huangfeng took out the Chenkin bag, set up a transparent entrance at the foot of the mountain, and wanted Tang Seng to walk in. In fact, as soon as he came in, he already found the position of the person who took the scriptures, but because the two tough people Sun Wukong and Zhu Baji were also there, he decided to defeat them first, and then deal with Tang Seng. Huangfeng knew that there was no point in fighting like this. He naturally couldn't beat Sun Wukong, but Sun Wukong couldn't help him. If he dragged it on, he was afraid that the people who learned the scriptures would die in this desert. So Huangfeng stretched out his hand and chanted a spell against the sky. I saw that the sky was suddenly pulled out, and Wukong and Baji were sucked into the opening in the sky. When they came out of the desert, they found that they had entered the outside world, which was Huangfengling. At the foot of the mountain, the white dragon horse was still waiting there. After seeing Wukong and Baji coming, he asked, "Where's the master?" When Baji thought of it, he became angry and asked Bai Longma, "Why didn't you save the master? How did he enter the fantasy realm of monsters?" Bai Longma said angrily, "What do you blame me for? I just want to be a horse honestly." Baji wanted to say a few more words, but Wukong stopped him. He walked back to the entrance into the yellow sand desert, but found that the entrance was gone. So he said to Baji, "Now is not the time to quarrel, let's go to the monster's cave first and ask the little monsters if there is any way to enter the desert again." The monster released us, definitely wanting to deal with the bald man alone. Donkey. Baji nodded, and the two brothers ran up the mountain, looking for the monster's cave. After they came to the cave, they ignored the 3 7s and 21 for the first time. They killed a lot of little monsters and destroyed the cave. Baji threw a fire inside and set the cave on fire. Wukong grabbed a little demon who was still alive and asked sternly, "Tell me, how do you get into the desert illusion of your king? Tell me and spare you." The little demon's face was covered in blood, but in front of him was the demon king, Sun Wukong. He was so frightened that his legs were so weak that he couldn't say anything. When Wukong saw that he was useless, he smashed his head with a stick and said to Baji, "I'm going to find someone to help, you wait here." Chapter 459, Sand Bottom Behemoth. Zhang Yang, who was still sleeping in the sand at the moment, suddenly heard footsteps in his ears. He opened his eyes and squinted, and saw a black figure in a cape walking slowly towards him. Shui'er also saw him beside him, hurried over, hugged him, and cried while sobbing, "Your Majesty." Zhang Yang wanted to get up, but found that his body was stiff and could not move at all. He had no choice but to smile helplessly. "I said, this monster brother, you are holding my woman in your arms, can you be more disciplined?" Shui'er turned her head and scolded, "Stinky monk, I'm not your woman, I'm just lying to you, I'm the king's person from life to death, In fact, Zhang Yang probably guessed it from the beginning. Shui'er values love and righteousness, and she only has the king in her heart, so the words she said to Zhang Yang before, I am yours, were just lying to him. But from the time of the previous skin-to-skin relationship, Zhang Yang felt that something was wrong with his body, as if his muscles were stiff. That's why he got up and exercised. Those push-ups and squats were just testing his body, but at that time, his body was very relaxed after the exercise, so he didn't pay attention to it. But now that he couldn't move at all, he knew it must be Cher. Zhang Yang smiled bitterly and asked, What have you done to me? Cher said, A little spell. As long as you stay still, your body will get harder and harder, and you won't be able to move at all. Unless I lift it myself, you won't want to move. Zhang Yang said, Isn't my mouth moving? Your ability is flawed, I will remind you kindly. At this time, Huangfeng walked up to Zhang Yang, squatted down, put his hands into the desert, grabbed a handful of sand, and then opened his hands to let them slide off his hands. Then he asked, Tang Seng, I heard that you are the reincarnation of Jin Chanzi. Tathagata sits down as the eldest disciple, do you have the ability to save her? Zhang Yang stared at him. Although there was a moon, he couldn't see his face clearly, but it didn't matter. He asked instead, Is this your attitude to ask for help? Huangfeng said, Yes, if you don't save me, I will eat you. As long as I can get your cultivation, I can find other ways. As long as you agree, I will not eat you. I am the wind, it is immortal. Quote. Zhang Yang shook his head and sighed, Alas, even if I want to save it, there is nothing I can do. Even if you eat me, there is nothing you can do. I am not a Tang monk at all, and I have no cultivation base for him. Huangfeng didn't believe it, and said angrily, How can you go to learn scriptures if you are not a Tang monk? And how can Sun Wukong and Zhu Baji be willing to be your apprentices? Zhang Yang explained, Monkey followed me to figure out some questions through the way of learning scriptures. Pig is to be with Chang'e. Who would be willing to go to learn scriptures with me, all with their own purposes? Me too, Guanyin said there is a gate of time and space, I just want to go home through that thing. I went to get scriptures because Tang Seng was beaten to death by a monkey, it's that simple. Huangfeng was stunned for a long time, squeezed his fist and smashed it in Zhang Yang's face, but when his hand was still some distance away from Zhang Yang, a golden light suddenly appeared from around Zhang Yang's body, blocking him. Zhang Yang said, It's useless, have you heard of absolute defense? I don't blame you if you haven't. If you tell me who you want to save, maybe I will help you, and killing me won't do you any good. And besides, you can't kill me. Huangfeng hesitated for a while, this was his last chance to see Cher. He didn't want to miss it, so he told Zhang Yang about his past with Cher. Cher, who was behind him, wept silently, she could no longer listen to those sweet things in the past, and turned around and ran towards the depths of the desert. Hearing the movement, Huangfeng looked back at her back, but did not act. Zhang Yang could see that Huangfeng wanted to catch up, so he said to him, If Cher can't come back, wouldn't Shui be your best destination? She should look a lot like her. Don't lose one and lose another. 1. There are not so many people in this world who can give everything for you. Don't wait until she has left you, it's too late for you to regret it. Huangfeng shook his head and said, She is just a substitute for Cher. What I love is Cher, not her. In fact, Huangfeng felt guilty. When he came to this desert, it was as if Cher was watching him at all times. How could he tell the truth of his love for Shui'e? Everything is because they are too similar. Huangfeng has always regarded Shui'e as Cher, which is the fact that he suffered the most, and also deceived himself the most. Zhang Yang was very worried about Shui'er, so he said, Here you should know what is buried under the desert. If something goes wrong with Shui'er, I hope you don't regret it. Huangfeng said, Impossible, Cher has buried the monster deep underground, it can't appear. Zhang Yang smiled bitterly and said, It seems that you don't know yet, we have all been attacked by those worms, and I have a hunch that there must be more than one. Huang Feng was stunned. Could it be that the monster has been breeding underground for so long? He didn't dare to imagine the scene of Shuiyi being attacked, so he hurriedly got up and chased in the direction where she was going. Zhang Yang yelled, but Huang Feng ignored him and disappeared in a blink of an eye. I'm going. Let me out. After a while, what should I do when the monster comes? Beast. No matter how Zhang Yang shouted, no one responded to him. Looking at the quiet surroundings, Zhang Yang swallowed nervously, for fear that another worm would appear at this time. It just so happened that the sun had quietly risen from the horizon, and Zhang Yang shouted, "Go back. Who asked you to come up? Brother Moon didn't leave, you came to grab your daughter-in-law so early in the morning." However, how could the sun pay attention to Zhang Yang? It still rose as quickly as a chicken blood, and a brilliance from the horizon shone on Zhang Yang. He narrowed his eyes and vaguely heard some voices. At this moment, a large area around Zhang Yang vibrated, and the gravel began to shake violently. Zhang Yang was bounced up and down like he was on a trampoline, but unfortunately he couldn't move at all. Soon, a lot of giant fangs broke out from the desert around him, and then a huge circular mouth bulged from both sides and quickly closed. Zhang Yang watched as Big Mouth came out of the soil and swallowed himself. A golden light appeared around his body, and the golden bell was looming. Huang Feng on the other side had already caught up with Shuiyi, hugged her in his arms, and scolded, "Why do you run so far alone? It's so dangerous." Shuiyi shed tears silently, opened her mouth, and made a hoarse voice. "Shuiyi finally knows why the king told me not to love you anymore." Chapter 460, The Demon Appears. Huang Feng knew that Shuiyi adored himself, but he always pretended to be Shuiyi in his heart, and he didn't want to let her down. Shuiyi gently pushed Huang Feng away, turned her back to him, and said, "Your Majesty, send me out, it will only be a hindrance here, and I can't do anything." Here, Huang Feng's mind is full of Shuiyi, so he also thinks it's better to send Shuiyi out first. So he chanted a spell to open a hole in the sky and gently sent Shuiyi up. However, just as Shuiyi's body was in the air, a gigantic creature suddenly burst out of the ground. A giant worm with a length of tens of meters opened its bloody mouth and swallowed Shuiyi into its mouth. Unlike the previous times, it swallowed it alive. This time it seemed to be conscious, chewing a few times with the fangs in its mouth until it was impossible for anyone to survive before swallowing the corpse. Huang Feng watched helplessly as the worm ate Shuiyi. His mind was broken, and he knelt on the ground with a thump. As Zhang Yang said, he once again lost a woman who loved him, and the great sadness that surged from the bottom of his heart caused him to burst into a miserable roar that resounded in this desert. Huang Feng's eyes were red, and the blue veins protruded on his forehead. He opened his arms and turned into a wind. The gravel was gathered by him again, and the wind and sand formed a giant yellow wind giant, which ran wildly towards the worm that chewed up Shuiyi. With one punch, the yellow wind giant shattered the worm's head, and then he grabbed the worm's body and frantically vented his grief and anger, tearing it in half. The day seemed to be the time when worms were active, and when the yellow wind giant was frantically shredding the worm, countless worms appeared from all directions around her. Huang Feng calmed down. He knew that the size of these worms was far from that of the demon, and they must be the little worms he bred. It seemed that Shuiyi's seal didn't work. Huang Feng put his hand into the sand, and when he pulled it out, there was a sword made of sand and gravel in his hand. He waved the sand sword and rushed towards the worms. In the blink of an eye, several worms were hacked to death by Huang Feng. When he cut the body of one of the worms, he only felt that there was a hard object in the worm's body, and the next second, he saw a golden light. The shiny thing was brought out of the worm's body by the sand sword. The yellow wind giant stretched out his hand to take the golden thing, only to see that it was Zhang Yang. He lay motionless in the giant's palm, greeting him. "Look, this is fate, I didn't expect to see you here." "To you." Huang Feng used a spell to unravel the spell on Zhang Yang's body, and he was able to resume his body movements again. Zhang Yang jumped from the yellow wind giant's hand, and then transformed into a real flowing blade Ruohuo from his body, and swung a knife at a worm that was about to attack the yellow wind giant's back. I saw a white blade of light emanating from Ruo Ren Ruo Huo, hitting the worm's head, cutting off its head directly. Huangfeng and Zhang Yang kept killing worms one after another, but they were more and more numerous, as if they could never be eliminated. Huangfeng realized that this was not the way. He squeezed Zhang Yang in his hand, and then he used all his strength to activate the spell, and the high-speed airflow ran from his side, gradually forming a huge storm airflow. The scope of the airflow gradually expanded, and soon spread to all the surrounding worms, killing them all under the high-speed airflow. In an instant, corpse marks were everywhere around them, and the stench filled the sky, like a hell on earth. Huangfeng was exhausted, and the giant form contacted and returned to his original state. It was only at such a close distance that Zhang Yang could see his appearance clearly. He was very handsome, and he didn't look like the other ugly monsters at all. Zhang Yang put away the flowing sword and said to Huangfeng, "Your strength is indeed very strong." Huangfeng did not speak, but climbed up with difficulty, staggering through the corpses to find something. Zhang Yang didn't see Shui'er, so he probably guessed what happened, and he also helped him find Shui'er's body here. They searched for a long time and found nothing, but heard a very strange sound coming from under their feet. The sound was like the cry of a baby. Zhang Yang looked at Huangfeng and wanted to ask him what was going on with the sound, but he saw Huangfeng's terrified expression. This voice is too familiar to Huangfeng. This is the voice of the demon that Shui'er sealed. He had seen the scene of Shui'er sealing it, and he had also seen its true face, so he was terrified. Zhang Yang asked, "What's going on?" Huangfeng looked around nervously and said, "It seems to be coming out, it's over." Seeing how nervous he looked, Zhang Yang also became frightened, so he hurriedly urged, "Who is coming out? What are you still doing? Run." Huangfeng shook his head. "No, it seems that it used these little worms to weaken the power of Shui'er's seal. If he is allowed to break through the Chenkin bag, then this monster will definitely cause chaos in the world." Zhang Yang didn't hear what he said next, but only heard the 3 words, "little worm." What is a little worm? Could it be that these giant monsters around are only trumpets? He didn't want to stay here any longer and said, "Let's go out first. I'm quite familiar with Guanyin Bodhisattva. I can go to her for help. There must be a way to reseal it. Let's go." Huangfeng stared at Zhang Yang and said, "If I don't go, you are not allowed to go either. Either I will go out after killing the demon, or you will die here with me." Zhang Yang was unhappy and scolded. "I said, why are you so unreasonable? You can just die alone, but you have to pull me. You can't be like this." Just as Huangfeng was about to open it, he heard a loud noise not far away. The desert was churning like an ocean, and then it quickly rose up, and a sand dune as high as a mountain appeared in front of them. "This is too big." Zhang Yang spread his legs and ran back. Huangfeng stood still, but stared at the huge sand mountain. His eyes became evil. "Long time no see, beast." I saw that the sand mountain continued to slide down, revealing the unbelievably large worm body inside. When it was completely exposed on the desert, we could see how big it was. No, even so, I don't know how big it is, because only the iceberg corner of its body is exposed. Zhang Yang ran a few steps and lost his strength, and then looked back. He sighed in his heart, where did such a big monster come from? And who the hell was Shui'er who could seal it? Could it be from the sky? The gigantic worm opened its mouth with a baby-like cry, and the disgusting saliva spewed out of its mouth and fell on the sand, emitting white smoke. "Hey, why are you still standing there stupidly? Leave the green hills so you won't have any firewood to burn, bro."